Hey friends, welcome to the Horror Sleep. Almost 90% of you watching aren't subscribed. If you enjoy these true park ranger horror stories, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps the channel. Oh, and where are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments. I've been a park ranger on the Appalachian Trail for 7 years, and I thought I'd seen everything these mountains had to offer. Hikers who lost their way, injuries requiring emergency intervention, hypothermia cases, and the occasional bear encounter. I've seen it all, but what happened during a patrol in October 2019 still keeps me up at night. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I didn't see. My name is Colin Raybrun, and I work on the northern section of the trail that runs through Berkshire, Massachusetts. It's a beautiful area, especially in the fall when the leaves change color and the entire forest is covered in red and gold. But it's also an isolated area. Some of these shelters are miles from the nearest road, accessible only on foot, and when the fog rolls in, as it does at this time of year, you can't see more than 20 feet in front of you. The Appalachian Trail, for those who don't know, stretches over 2,190 miles from Georgia to Maine. It's one of the longest continuously marked footpaths in the world, and every year thousands of through hikers attempt to walk the entire thing. Most don't make it. The trail is brutal, physically and mentally, and by October, only the most determined hikers are still out there, racing against the coming winter. Along the trail, there are shelters, 3-sided wooden structures with a slanted roof and a raised wooden platform for sleeping. They're basic, just enough to keep you out of the rain and off the cold ground. Some have a logbook where hikers sign in, leaving notes about trail conditions, wildlife sightings, or just messages for friends following behind them. These logbooks are surprisingly useful for us rangers. They help us track who's on the trail, and sometimes they give us early warning when something's wrong. It was a Tuesday morning, October 15th, when I started my patrol. The forecast called for fog, and they weren't kidding. By the time I hit the trailhead at dawn, the mist was so thick I could barely see the trail markers. I had my radio, my pack with basic first aid supplies, and my sidearm, standard issue for rangers in case of wildlife. Black bears aren't usually aggressive, but you never know. My route that day would take me to 3 shelters: Willow Creek, Pine Ridge, and Glen Brook. Each one was about 4 miles apart, and I'd check them for damage, resupply the emergency boxes we kept there, and make sure no one was in trouble. It should have been routine. I reached Willow Creek Shelter around 9 in the morning. The structure sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines that disappeared into the fog above. The front of the shelter was open, facing the trail, and as I approached, I could hear water dripping from the roof. It had rained the night before, a steady downpour that had turned parts of the trail into mud. The shelter was empty, or so I thought at first. I climbed up onto the wooden platform and did my usual inspection. The roof was holding up, no major leaks, though there was water pooled in a few spots on the floor. The logbook sat on a small shelf nailed to the back wall, protected from the weather. I flipped it open and scanned the last few entries. October 12th, made it to Willow Creek. Rain all day, feet are killing me. Only 300 miles to Katahdin. Trail name, Boots. October 13th. Quiet night. Saw a deer this morning, beautiful spot. Trail name, Wanderer. October 14th, no entry. I frowned. It wasn't unusual for a shelter to be empty for a day or two this late in the season, but something about the place felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, just a gut feeling that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Then I saw it. On the sleeping platform, tucked against the back wall, was a sleeping bag. Not just any sleeping bag, a nice one, the kind serious hikers use, rated for below freezing temperatures. It was zipped up, lying flat on the wooden boards like someone had been sleeping in it and then smoothed it out before leaving. That wasn't the strange part, though. The strange part was that the sleeping bag was completely dry. I walked over and touched it. Bone dry. Not even a hint of dampness. I looked up at the roof directly above it. Water was dripping steadily from a crack in the boards, hitting the platform just a few feet away. The entire floor of the shelter was wet, puddles everywhere, except for the spot where the sleeping bag lay. It didn't make sense. If someone had slept here last night, their bag should have been soaked. The rain had come down hard, and the roof leaked right above that spot. There was no way the bag could have stayed dry unless someone had put it there after the rain stopped, which would have been sometime early this morning. But if that was the case, why wasn't there an entry in the log book? I picked up the sleeping bag and shook it out, looking for any clues, a name tag, a stuff sack, anything. Nothing. It was just a high-end sleeping bag, Marmot brand, forest green, and completely anonymous. I set it back down, carefully, in the same position I'd found it. That's when I noticed the piece of paper. It was tucked under the edge of the sleeping bag, folded once. I pulled it out and unfolded it. The paper was damp around the edges, but the writing in the center was still legible. Written in black ink, neat block letters. Came, left, shouldn't come back. Below that, a date. October 15th, 2019. Today's date. My stomach tightened. I read it again, trying to make sense of it. Someone had written this note today, left it here with the sleeping bag, and then vanished without signing the logbook. The note itself was cryptic, almost like a warning. But a warning about what? And who was it meant for? I folded the note and put it in my jacket pocket. Then I took out my radio and called it in. "Base, this is Ranger Rayburn. You copy?" Static crackled for a moment, then a voice came through. It was Sarah, our dispatcher back at the ranger station. "Copy, Colin. Go ahead. I'm at Willow Creek Shelter. Found an abandoned sleeping bag and a note. Looks recent. Anyone report missing gear?" There was a pause, then Sarah's voice came back. "Negative. No reports of missing gear. What's the note say?" I hesitated, glancing down at the sleeping bag again. "It's strange. Says, came, left, shouldn't come back. Dated today." Another pause, longer this time. "That's weird. You think it's a prank?" "Maybe." I looked around the shelter, scanning the fog-shrouded trees beyond. "I'm going to keep checking the other shelters. If I find anything else, I'll let you know." "Copy that. Stay safe, Colin." I clipped the radio back to my belt and stood there for another minute, just listening. The forest was quiet, unnaturally so. No birds, no rustling in the underbrush, just the steady drip of water from the roof and the distant whisper of a wind through the pines. I didn't like it. I left the sleeping bag where it was and headed back to the trail. Pine Ridge Shelter was next, about 4 miles north. The fog was getting thicker, and the trail was slick with mud and wet leaves. I had to watch my footing, especially on the rocky sections where a fall could mean a broken ankle, or worse. As I walked, I kept thinking about the note. Came, left, shouldn't come back. What did that mean? Was it a warning to other hikers? A reminder to the person who wrote it? And why no logbook entry? The Appalachian Trail has its share of odd traditions. Hikers leave trail magic, surprise caches of food and drinks for other hikers. They write messages in logbooks, sometimes poems, sometimes just random thoughts. Some people use the trail to disappear for a while, to get away from whatever's chasing them in the real world. But this felt different. This felt deliberate. By the time I reached Pine Ridge Shelter, it was almost noon. The fog had lifted slightly, but the sky was still overcast. heavy with the promise of more rain. This shelter was older than Willow Creek, the wood dark and weathered, but it was in decent shape. I climbed up and did my inspection. Empty. No sleeping bags, no gear, nothing unusual. The logbook had 2 entries from the past week, both from through hikers heading north, pushing to finish before the snow came. I added my own entry, noting the date and time of my patrol, then sat down on the edge of the platform to eat a quick lunch. As I chewed on a protein bar, I pulled out the note again and read it in the better light. The handwriting was careful, almost mechanical, like whoever wrote it had taken their time. The ink was black, probably from a regular ballpoint pen, and there were no smudges or signs of the writer being in a hurry. Came. Left. Shouldn't come back. I stuffed the note back in my pocket and finished my protein bar, washing it down with water from my canteen. Then I packed up and headed for Glenbrook Shelter, the last stop on my patrol. The trail between Pine Ridge and Glenbrook is one of my favorite sections, a winding path that follows a ridgeline with views of the valley below. On clear days, you can see for miles, but today, all I could see was fog and the dark silhouettes of trees pressing in from both sides. I was about halfway to Glenbrook when I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. Someone else moving fast through the underbrush off to my right, parallel to the trail. I stopped and turned, peering into the fog, my hand instinctively going to the pepper spray on my belt. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone there?" The footsteps stopped. Silence. I waited, listening, my heart pounding a little harder than it should have been. Then, after what felt like a full minute, the footsteps started again, moving away this time, deeper into the woods. "Hey!" I shouted. "If you need help, I'm a ranger." No response. Just the sound of someone, or something, crashing through the underbrush until it faded into the distance. I stood there for another moment, debating whether to follow, but decided against it. It was probably just a hiker who wandered off trail, maybe someone who didn't want to be bothered. Still, the timing felt wrong. First the note, now this. I made a mental note to mention it in my report. I reached Glenbrook Shelter just before 2 in the afternoon. This one was the smallest of the 3, set back from the trail in a grove of hemlock trees. The shelter had seen better days. Part of the roof sagged, and there was a hole in the floor near the back corner that I'd been meaning to patch. I climbed up, expecting to find it empty like Pine Ridge. It wasn't. There, on the sleeping platform, was another sleeping bag. Same brand, same color, same position as the one at Willow Creek. Bone dry, despite the fact that the roof here leaked even worse, and water was dripping onto the platform in multiple spots. And tucked under the edge of the bag was another piece of paper. My hands were shaking slightly as I picked it up and unfolded it. Same handwriting, same black ink. Came, left, shouldn't come back. Same date, October 15th, 2019. I stared at the note, my mind racing. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was doing this on purpose, leaving these sleeping bags and notes at the shelters. But why? And how were they moving so fast? Glenbrook was 4 miles from Willow Creek, and I'd been on the trail the whole time. I hadn't seen anyone pass me, unless they were off trail. I thought about the footsteps I'd heard earlier, the sound of someone moving through the woods parallel to the trail. Could it have been the same person? But if they were trying to stay hidden, why leave these obvious signs behind? I pulled out my radio. "Base, this is Rayburn. You copy?" Sarah's voice crackled through. "Copy, Colin. What's up?" "I'm at Glenbrook. Found another sleeping bag and note. Same as Willow Creek. Exact same setup." There was a long pause. When Sarah spoke again, her tone was more serious. "Colin, that's really strange. Do you think someone's following you? I don't know. I looked around the shelter, then out into the fog-shrouded forest. But I heard footsteps earlier, off trail. Someone was out there. You want me to send someone out to meet you? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say yes, but another part, the stubborn part that had kept me alive in the backcountry for 7 years, told me I could handle this. Not yet, I said. I'm going to check the area, see if I can find any tracks. I'll call back in 30 minutes. Be careful, Colin. Always am. I clipped the radio back and stepped off the platform, circling the shelter slowly. The ground was soft from the rain, perfect for leaving tracks, and it didn't take long to find them. Boot prints, fresh, leading away from the shelter and into the woods to the north. I crouched down, examining them. Men's size, probably a 10 or 11. Hiking boots, good tread. The prints were deep, suggesting the person was carrying weight, maybe a full pack. I followed them for about 50 yards, moving carefully, my eyes scanning the woods ahead. Then the tracks just stopped. One moment they were there, clear as day in the soft earth. The next, nothing. Just undisturbed forest floor covered in wet leaves. I stood there, confused, looking around for any sign of where the person had gone. Had they stepped onto a rock? Climbed a tree? But there was no rock nearby, and the trees here weren't the kind you could easily climb with a heavy pack. It was like they'd vanished into thin air. I walked in a slow circle, checking for any other tracks, any disturbance in the undergrowth. Nothing. Whoever had been here was gone, and they hadn't left a trail. I headed back to the shelter, my mind spinning. This was getting stranger by the minute, and I didn't like it. Someone was out here, moving through the woods, leaving these cryptic notes and disappearing without a trace. It didn't feel dangerous, not yet, but it felt wrong. I radioed Sarah again. Base, this is Rayburn. I found tracks leading away from Glenbrook, but they just stop. Whoever was here is gone now. Do you think it's safe to head back? I looked up at the darkening sky. It would be night soon, and I didn't want to be out here in the fog after dark. Yeah, I'm heading back now. I'll file a full report when I get in. Copy that. See you soon. I took one last look at the sleeping bag and the note, then started the hike back to my truck. The whole way, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone following me through the fog, but there was no one. Just the trees, the mist, and the growing sense that something was very, very wrong on the Appalachian Trail. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those sleeping bags, perfectly dry in the middle of wet, leaking shelters. I kept replaying the note in my head, turning the words over and over. Came. Left. Shouldn't come back. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like a warning, but I couldn't figure out who it was meant for, or what it was warning against. The next morning, I was back at the ranger station before sunrise. Sarah was already there, brewing coffee in the break room. She looked up when I walked in, concern written across her face. You look like hell, Colin. Didn't sleep much. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the desk. Did you check the hiker database? See if anyone matching that description is registered on this section. Sarah nodded, pulling up a file on her computer. I checked. There are 3 registered thru hikers in the area, all of them accounted for. One's already past your patrol zone, heading into Vermont. The other 2 are behind schedule, probably still down near the Connecticut border. What about day hikers? Section hikers. Nothing reported, but you know how it is this time of year. Most people aren't filing plans anymore. The serious hikers are either already done or way up north. I leaned back in my chair, frustrated. So, we've got someone out there who's not registered, leaving strange notes and sleeping bags, and we have no idea who they are or what they want. Sarah took a sip of her coffee. Could be a squatter. Someone who decided to live off the trail for a while. Maybe. I pulled the 2 notes out of my pocket and laid them on the desk. But look at this. Same handwriting, same message, same date. This feels planned, like someone's trying to send a message. A message to who? That's what I can't figure out. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us staring at the notes. Then Sarah spoke up. You know what this reminds me of? That case we had 2 years ago. Remember the trail names? I did. It had been a strange situation. A hiker who'd been leaving bizarre trail names and logbooks all up and down the trail. Names like The Watcher and Shadow Step. It turned out to be someone having a mental health crisis, and we eventually found them and got them the help they needed. But this felt different. This felt more deliberate. You think this is someone having a breakdown? I asked. It's possible. The trail does that to people sometimes. All that isolation, all that time alone with your thoughts. Some people can't handle it. I nodded slowly. I'm going back out there today. I want to check those shelters again, see if anything's changed. Sarah looked worried. You want someone to go with you? No, I'll be fine. But if I'm not back by 6, send someone out. Colin, be careful. If this person is unstable, I know. I stood up and grabbed my pack. I'll radio in every hour. The fog was back when I hit the trailhead, thick and cold, wrapping around the trees like smoke. I moved quickly, covering the distance to Willow Creek Shelter in just under 2 hours. My legs were fresh, my senses sharp, and I was ready for anything. Or so I thought. When I reached the shelter, my stomach dropped. The sleeping bag was gone. I climbed up onto the platform looking around, but there was no sign of it. The spot where it had been was still dry, a perfect rectangle of bone-dry wood in the middle of the wet floor. But the bag itself had vanished. I checked the logbook, flipping through the pages frantically. Still no new entries, nothing since the last time I'd been here. What the hell? I muttered, running a hand through my hair. I looked around the shelter, searching for any other clues. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. Scratches. On the wooden post at the back corner of the shelter there were deep scratches, like someone had been carving into the wood with a knife. They were fresh, the wood underneath still pale. I moved closer, tracing the marks with my finger. They didn't form letters or symbols, just random gouges, but something about them made my skin crawl. They looked frantic, desperate, like someone had been attacking the post in a fit of rage or fear. I pulled out my radio. Base, this is Rayburn. The sleeping bag at Willow Creek is gone. There are also fresh scratches on one of the posts. Something's definitely going on here. Sarah's voice came through, tense. Do you think someone's messing with you? I don't know. But I'm heading to Pine Ridge and Glen Brook to check if the same thing happened there. Be careful, Colin, and keep your radio on. Will do. I left Willow Creek and pushed hard toward Pine Ridge, my mind racing. If someone had taken the sleeping bag from Willow Creek, they might have taken the others too. But why? And more importantly, where were they now? The trail was quiet, almost too quiet. I didn't hear any birds, no rustling in the underbrush, just the sound of my own footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the trees. The fog pressed in close, limiting my visibility to maybe 30 feet in any direction. About halfway to Pine Ridge, I stopped. Something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it, just a gut feeling that made me turn around and scan the trail behind me. That's when I saw him, a figure standing about 50 yards back, barely visible through the fog. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and a backpack, and he was just standing there, watching me. My heart rate spiked. I raised my hand in a wave, calling out, "Hey, you okay?" The figure didn't move. "I'm a ranger," I shouted. "Do you need help?" Still nothing. He just stood there, motionless like a statue. I started walking toward him, my hand instinctively going to the pepper spray on my belt. "Sir, I need you to identify yourself." As soon as I took a step forward, he turned and walked off the trail, disappearing into the fog. "Hey, wait!" I broke into a jog, reaching the spot where I'd seen him, but there was nothing. No footprints, no sign anyone had been there at all. I looked around, confused and more than a little freaked out. How was that possible? The ground here was soft, muddy. Anyone walking through would have left tracks. I pulled out my radio. "Base, this is Rayburn. I just saw someone on the trail. He was watching me, and when I approached, he disappeared into the fog. I'm checking for tracks now." Sarah's voice came through immediately, worried. "Colin, I'm sending someone out to meet you." "No, wait. I need to check the other shelters first, but yeah, maybe send someone. Have them meet me at Glen Brook in 2 hours." "Copy that. Miles is on his way." Miles Redden was another ranger, a guy I'd worked with for the past 3 years. He was solid, reliable, and exactly the kind of backup I wanted right now. I kept moving, my eyes scanning the fog constantly. Every shadow looked like a person. Every sound made me jump. By the time I reached Pine Ridge Shelter, my nerves were shot. The shelter was empty. No sleeping bag, no note. Nothing unusual except for the same deep scratches I'd found at Willow Creek, carved into one of the support posts. I documented it with my phone, taking photos of the scratches from multiple angles. Then I checked the logbook. Still no new entries. This was getting seriously weird. I headed toward Glen Brook, moving faster now, eager to finish my patrol and get the hell off this section of the trail. The fog was starting to clear slightly, patches of weak sunlight breaking through the clouds, but it didn't make me feel any better. When I reached Glen Brook, Miles was already there, waiting by the shelter. He was a big guy, 6'3" and built like a linebacker with a thick beard and kind eyes. He gave me a wave as I approached. "Colin, Sarah said you were having a strange day." That's putting it mildly. I climbed up onto the platform and gestured to the spot where the sleeping bag had been. It was right here yesterday, bone dry, even though the roof was leaking all over. And now it's gone. Miles crouched down, examining the spot. No sign of it at all. Nothing. And I saw someone on the trail earlier. Tall guy, dark jacket, backpack. He was just standing there watching me. When I tried to approach, he vanished. Miles looked up at me, his expression serious. Vanished how? Like, walked into the fog and disappeared. No tracks, no sound, nothing. Miles stood up, brushing dirt off his knees. That's unusual. You think I'm losing it? No. He looked around the shelter, his eyes sharp. But I think we need to figure out what's going on here before someone gets hurt. We spent the next hour searching the area around Glen Brook, looking for any sign of the mysterious hiker or the missing sleeping bags. We found more scratches, this time on a tree about 20 yards from the shelter, and what looked like a partial boot print near a fallen log. But that was it. As the sun started to dip toward the horizon, Miles and I hiked back to the ranger station together. The whole way, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that somewhere in the fog-shrouded woods, someone was following us. When we got back, Sarah had pulled up historical records of the shelters, looking for any patterns or previous incidents. What she found made my blood run cold. "Colin," she said, turning her computer screen toward me. "Look at this." It was an incident report from 1987, 32 years ago. A hiker named Thomas Merrick had gone missing on this same section of the trail in October. He'd been reported missing by his hiking partner, who said Thomas had stayed behind at Glen Brook Shelter while he went ahead to get supplies. When the partner came back 2 days later, Thomas was gone. No sleeping bag, no gear, no note, just gone. They'd searched for weeks, but never found him. Jesus, I muttered, reading through the report. Did they ever figure out what happened? No, Sarah said. The case went cold. They assumed he'd either fallen somewhere and his body was never recovered, or he'd intentionally disappeared. Miles leaned over my shoulder, reading the report. That's a hell of a coincidence. Yeah, I looked at Sarah. Are there any other cases, other missing hikers? She pulled up another file. 2 more, both in October, both on this section of the trail, 1993 and 2004. Neither one was ever found. The room went quiet. We all understood what this meant. Whatever was happening out there, it wasn't new. It had been going on for decades. We need to shut down this section, I said finally. At least until we figure out what's going on. Sarah nodded. I'll talk to the supervisor in the morning. But Colin, if there's someone out there doing this, someone who's been at it for this long. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I went home that night, but I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about those missing hikers, about the sleeping bags and the notes. Came. Left. Shouldn't come back. Was it a warning, a threat, or something else entirely? I didn't know, but I was damn sure going to find out. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going back out there, but this time I wasn't going alone, and I wasn't going unprepared. Miles met me at the station at dawn, and we geared up with everything we might need. Extra batteries for our radios, first aid kits, emergency flares, and yes, our sidearms. We weren't taking any chances. Sarah had tried to convince us to wait until the section could be officially closed and a full search team could be organized, but I argued against it. If there was someone out there, someone who'd been doing this for decades, we needed to act now before they disappeared again. Just promise me you'll be careful, Sarah said, as we were loading our packs, and check in every 30 minutes. We will, I assured her. Miles and I hit the trail just as the sun was rising, burning off the morning fog. The plan was simple. We'd hike to all 3 shelters, document everything we could find, and try to pick up a trail if the mysterious hiker showed up again. The woods felt different that morning. Maybe it was knowing the history, knowing that people had vanished here before, but every shadow seemed darker, every sound more sinister. Miles felt it too. I could tell by the way he kept scanning the tree line, his hand never far from the canister of bear spray on his belt. We reached Willow Creek first. The shelter looked the same as it had yesterday, empty except for those scratches on the post. Miles walked around the perimeter while I checked the logbook again. And that's when I saw it. A new entry. My hands were shaking as I read it. October 17th, 2019. I know you're looking for me. I'm looking for you, too. We're playing the same game, Ranger, but you don't know the rules yet. No trail name, no signature. Just those 3 sentences in the same neat block letters from the notes. Miles, I called out, my voice tight. Get over here. He jogged over and read the entry over my shoulder. What the hell? He was here, I said, looking around the shelter, my eyes wide. Probably last night. He knows we're looking for him, and he's treating this like a game. Miles pulled out his radio. Sarah, this is Redden. We've got a new logbook entry at Willow Creek. Whoever's doing this knows we're on to them, and they're escalating. Sarah's voice came through, tense. What does it say? Miles read it to her, and there was a long silence on the other end. I'm calling this in to state police, Sarah said finally. This isn't just a weird hiker anymore. This is someone who could be dangerous. Agreed, I said. But we're going to keep checking the other shelters. If this guy's playing games, maybe we can use that to track him. Just be careful, Sarah repeated. We left Willow Creek and headed for Pine Ridge, moving faster now, alert to every sound and movement around us. The trail was quiet, almost too quiet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Halfway to Pine Ridge, Miles stopped suddenly, holding up his hand for me to halt. "You hear that?" he whispered. I listened. At first, I didn't hear anything except the wind in the trees. Then I caught it, a faint sound, rhythmic and deliberate. Footsteps. Someone was walking parallel to us, about 50 yards off the trail to our right, matching our pace. "Hey!" Miles shouted into the woods. "This is the Park Service. Identify yourself!" The footsteps stopped. We waited, both of us tense, our hands on our bear spray. After a moment, a voice called back from the woods, distant but clear. "You want to find me, Ranger? Then follow the signs. I left you plenty." It was a man's voice, calm and measured, with no hint of fear or aggression, just matter of fact. "We need to talk to you," I called back. "Come out where we can see you." There was a pause, then a laugh, soft and unsettling. "Not yet. You haven't earned it yet. Keep looking." Then the footsteps started again, moving away this time, deeper into the woods. "Come on," Miles said, starting to move off the trail. "Wait." I grabbed his arm. "That's what he wants. He's trying to lure us off the trail, get us separated, lost. We stick to the plan. We check the shelters, document everything, and we don't play his game." Miles hesitated, then nodded. "You're right, but I don't like this, Colin." "Me neither." We reached Pine Ridge Shelter 20 minutes later. The logbook there had a new entry too. October 17th, 2019. "Second shelter, getting warmer. You're closer than you think. But are you ready to see what you'll find?" "This guy's insane," Miles muttered. "Maybe," I said, photographing the entry with my phone. "Or maybe he's just trying to scare us. Either way, we're not backing down." We checked the shelter thoroughly, looking for anything that might give us a clue to who this person was or what they wanted. Miles found something interesting. Fresh scratches on the underside of the sleeping platform, hidden from view unless you were looking for them. "Colin, check this out." I crouched down and looked where he was pointing. The scratches formed a pattern this time, not random gouges but deliberate marks. They looked like tally marks, groups of 4 vertical lines with a 5th diagonal line crossing them. I counted them, 32 marks, 32 groups of 5. 160. "What do you think it means?" Miles asked. "I don't know. Days? Nights? Victims?" The thought made my stomach turn. We radioed Sarah and described what we'd found. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "State police are on their way. They should be at the station within the hour. Do you want to wait for them, or should I have them meet you at Glen Brook?" I thought about it. Glen Brook was the last shelter, the one where this had all started. If we were going to find answers, that's where they'd be. "Have them meet us at Glen Brook," I said. "We're going to finish this." The hike to Glen Brook felt like the longest 4 miles of my life. Every step, I expected to see the mysterious hiker emerge from the fog, to hear his voice calling out from the woods, but the trail was silent, and we saw no one. When we finally reached Glen Brook Shelter, the sun was directly overhead, breaking through the clouds and casting dappled shadows across the clearing. The shelter sat there, quiet and seemingly empty, just like it had been the last time I'd seen it. Miles and I approached cautiously, our eyes scanning the surrounding woods. Nothing moved. No sounds except the drip of water from the roof and the rustle of wind through the hemlock trees. I climbed up onto the platform and checked the logbook. One more entry. October 17th, 2019. Final shelter. You made it. Now look behind you. My blood ran cold. I spun around, my hand going to my bear spray. There, standing at the edge of the clearing about 30 yards away, was a man. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing a dark green jacket and carrying a worn backpack. His face was partially obscured by a hood, but I could see enough to tell he was probably in his 50s, with a weathered face and intense eyes. "Are you the one who's been leaving the notes?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The man didn't answer immediately. He just stood there watching us. Miles stepped up beside me. "Sir, we need you to identify yourself. You're on federal land, and you've been engaging in suspicious behavior." The man tilted his head slightly as if considering the statement. Then he spoke, his voice the same calm tone we'd heard in the woods. "My name is Thomas Merrick, and I've been waiting a very long time to tell my story." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Thomas Merrick, the hiker who'd gone missing in 1987, the one who was never found. "That's impossible," Miles said. "Thomas Merrick disappeared 32 years ago." "Did I?" The man took a step closer. "Or did I just choose to stay?" "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "If you're really Thomas Merrick, where have you been for 32 years? He gestured to the woods around us. "Here, in these mountains, watching, waiting, learning." "Learning what?" His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time I saw something in them that made my skin crawl. Not madness, not anger, just emptiness. Learning that some people come to the trail to find themselves, and some come to lose themselves. I came to lose myself, Ranger, and I succeeded. Miles and I exchanged a glance. This was beyond weird. This was heading into genuinely dangerous territory. "Mr. Merrick," I said carefully, "I think you need help. We can get you off this mountain, get you medical attention, contact your family." "My family?" He laughed, a hollow sound. "My family gave up on me decades ago. I gave up on myself decades ago. The only family I have now is these woods." "Then why the notes?" Miles asked. "Why the sleeping bags? Why are you trying to get our attention?" Thomas looked at him for a long moment. "Because I wanted to see if anyone cared, if anyone would notice. 32 years I've been out here, and you're the first people who've actually paid attention." "We found the tally marks," I said. 160 of them. What do they mean?" His face darkened. "Nights, 160 nights I've spent in these shelters over the years, watching other hikers come and go, leaving their trash, their logbooks full of meaningless words. None of them ever saw me. None of them ever cared." "What about the sleeping bags?" Miles pressed. "Where are they?" "Hidden. Safe. They're mine now, just like everything else I've found over the years." I was starting to understand. This wasn't about danger or violence. This was about loneliness. About a man who'd been living in isolation for so long that he'd forgotten how to be part of the world. "Thomas," I said gently, "you don't have to live like this. Let us help you." He shook his head slowly. "You don't understand. I don't want help. I want to be left alone. I want people to know I'm here, to know I exist. But I want to be left alone." "Then why reveal yourself now?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Because I'm dying, Ranger. Cancer. I've got maybe 6 months if I'm lucky. And when I go, I want someone to know that Thomas Merrick was here. That he survived out here for 32 years. That he became part of these mountains." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of approaching footsteps. The state police had arrived, 2 officers emerging from the trail with Sarah behind them. Thomas looked at them, then back at me. I won't run, I won't fight, but I need you to promise me something." "What?" I asked. "When they find my body, leave it out here. Don't take me off this mountain. Let me stay where I belong." Before I could respond, the officers moved in, identifying themselves and asking Thomas to come with them. He went quietly, without resistance, and as they led him away, he turned back one last time. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. "Thank you for caring enough to look." Then he was gone, disappearing down the trail with the officers. Miles, Sarah, and I stood there in silence for a long moment. Finally, Sarah spoke. "What the hell just happened?" "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted. "But I think we just met a ghost. A living ghost." Over the next few weeks, we learned more about Thomas Merrick. He'd been a software engineer from Boston who'd set out to hike the Appalachian Trail in 1987 after a divorce. His hiking partner, the one who'd reported him missing, said Thomas had been depressed, talking about wanting to disappear, to start over. And apparently, he had. He'd been living in the woods for 32 years, surviving on food he foraged, gear he scavenged from abandoned campsites, and the occasional supply run to small towns on the edge of the trail. He'd become an expert at staying hidden, at moving through the woods without being seen. The authorities tried to charge him with various offenses, trespassing, theft, but in the end, they let him go. He was dying, and he wasn't a threat to anyone. They put him in contact with hospice care, but from what I heard, he refused treatment. The last I heard, Thomas Merrick was back on the trail, living out his final days in the mountains he'd called home for more than 3 decades. And true to his request, when they eventually found his body 6 months later in a shelter not far from Glen Brook, they left him there. They buried him in a small cemetery near the trail, under a simple marker that read, "Thomas Merrick, 1952-20. He found his home in the mountains." I still patrol that section of the trail. I still check those shelters. And sometimes, late at night when the fog rolls in and the woods go quiet, I think about Thomas, about a man who chose to disappear, to become part of the wilderness he loved, and I wonder if I'd have the courage or the madness to do the same. The sleeping bags never turned up. Neither did most of the gear he'd scavenged over the years. Maybe it's still out there, hidden in some cave or buried under years of leaves, or maybe it disappeared with him, taken by the mountain that had claimed him so long ago. Either way, I learned something important from Thomas Merrick. The Appalachian Trail isn't just a path through the mountains. For some people, it's an escape. For others, it's a home. And for a few, it's a place to disappear entirely. I just hope that if I ever meet someone like Thomas again, someone who's chosen to lose themselves in the wilderness, I'll know how to help them before it's too late. Because in the end, that's what being a ranger is all about. Not just protecting the land, but protecting the people who come to it, even the ones who don't want to be found. My name is Elaine Whitaker, and I've been a park ranger on the Appalachian Trail for 11 years. In that time, I've dealt with every kind of emergency you can imagine. Lost hikers, medical evacuations, bear encounters, hypothermia cases in the middle of summer when hikers underestimate how cold these mountains can get at night. I've seen broken bones, heat stroke, and more blisters than I care to count. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened in the spring of 2020. I'm stationed in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, one of the most challenging sections of the entire 2,190-mile trail. The terrain here is brutal, steep climbs, rocky scrambles, and weather that can turn deadly in minutes. We get hikers from all over the world attempting to summit the Presidential Range, and every year, we have to rescue people who got in over their heads. The trail markers in our section are critical. We use white blazes painted on trees and rocks to mark the main trail, and we have wooden signposts at major intersections showing distances and directions. These markers are the only thing keeping hikers on course when visibility drops to zero, which happens a lot up here. Maintaining them is one of our most important jobs. Dana Hollis had been my patrol partner for 3 years. She was younger than me, only 26, but she was sharp, observant, and had better wilderness skills than most rangers twice her age. We worked well together, falling into an easy rhythm on our patrols. She had a degree in environmental science and had grown up hiking these mountains with her father, so she knew the terrain like the back of her hand. It was the second week of May when things started getting strange. The snow had finally melted from the lower elevations, and early season hikers were beginning to trickle through. The weather was typical for that time of year: cold mornings, warm afternoons, and frequent rain showers that left everything damp and muddy. Dana and I were doing our weekly patrol of the Northern Loop, a 20-mile circuit that took us past 4 major trail intersections and 2 shelters. We'd started at dawn, planning to complete the loop by late afternoon. The first intersection we reached was at Crawford Notch, where the Appalachian Trail crosses Route 302. The wooden signpost there had been recently replaced after a fallen tree damaged the old one during winter. I'd installed it myself just 3 weeks earlier, using 4-inch galvanized nails to secure the directional signs to the post. When we arrived that morning, something was wrong. The signs were backwards. "Elaine," Dana said, stopping short and pointing at the signpost. "Is it just me, or is that pointing the wrong way?" I looked at the sign, my stomach tightening. The arrow that should have pointed north toward Mount Washington was pointing south. The arrow that should have pointed south toward Franconia Ridge was pointing north. "That's not right," I said, moving closer to examine it. The wooden arrows were definitely reversed, but here's what made my skin crawl. The nails were still in their original positions. The wood around the nail holes showed no signs of being removed and replaced. There were no fresh scratches, no tool marks, nothing to suggest the signs had been taken off and turned around. "How is this possible?" Dana asked, crouching down to look at the post from different angles. "These nails are in the exact same holes. Look, you can see where the wood has weathered around them." She was right. The nails had been in place long enough for the wood to slightly discolor around the metal. If someone had removed the signs and flipped them, there would be new holes or at least evidence of the old holes being disturbed. "Check the ground," I said, already scanning the area around the post. We both searched the muddy ground, looking for footprints, tire tracks, any sign that someone had been here recently. The area around the post was a mix of mud and old snowmelt, perfect for preserving tracks. And there were tracks, 2 sets of boot prints, different sizes, overlapping each other in the mud directly behind the signpost. But here's the thing. They didn't lead anywhere. They just appeared behind the post, overlapped, and then disappeared. There were no approaching tracks, no departing tracks. Just those 2 sets of prints in the mud, like 2 people had been standing there, one behind the other, and then vanished into thin air. "This doesn't make any sense," Dana muttered, taking photos with her phone. I pulled out my radio. "Base, this is Ranger Whitaker. We've got a situation at the Crawford Notch intersection. The trail signs have been reversed, but there's no evidence of tampering. We're going to correct them and continue the patrol." Our dispatcher, a guy named Rick, who'd been working the desk for 20 years, responded immediately. "Copy that, Elaine. Reversed how?" "North and south arrows are pointing in opposite directions. The signs appear to be physically turned around, but the mounting hardware shows no signs of removal or replacement." There was a pause. "That's weird. You think it's vandalism?" "I don't know what it is," I said honestly. "But we're fixing it now and documenting everything." I had a small toolkit in my pack, and I carefully removed the directional signs, noting how the nails slid out of the wood smoothly, like they'd been in place for weeks. We flipped the signs back to their correct orientations and nailed them in. As I worked, Dana kept studying those footprints. "Elaine," she said quietly, "these prints are fresh, like made this morning fresh. You can see where the mud's still settling at the edges, but they don't go anywhere." "I know." She looked up at me, her expression troubled. "Someone was standing here recently, right behind this post, and then they just weren't." We marked the location with GPS coordinates and took extensive photos before moving on. The next intersection was 3 miles north, where a side trail branched off toward Zealand Falls. The same thing had happened there. The directional signs were reversed, the nails were in their original positions with no signs of tampering, and there were those same mysterious footprints behind the post. 2 sets, different sizes, overlapping, leading nowhere. "Okay, this is officially creepy," Donna said, examining the second set of prints. I radioed it in, and Rick's concern was evident in his voice. "2 intersections in one morning? Elaine, this sounds like someone's deliberately messing with trail markers." "I know," I said, looking around at the silent woods, "but I don't know how they're doing it without leaving a trail." "Could be someone with trail experience," Rick suggested. "Someone who knows how to move through the woods without leaving obvious tracks." "Maybe." But even as I said it, I didn't buy it. You can minimize your tracks, sure, but you can't make them disappear entirely, especially not in mud like this. And you definitely can't reverse wooden signs without removing the nails. Dana was crouched by the footprints again, her face inches from the mud. "Elaine, look at this." I joined her. She was pointing at the heel of one of the boot prints. There was something pressed into the mud, a small pattern or mark. "It's a logo," she said. "See? That's a Merrill boot print, pretty new, based on how defined the tread is. Can you tell what size?" She pulled out a small ruler from her pack and measured. "Men's 10, maybe 10.5. The other print is smaller, maybe a women's 7. We documented everything and moved on to the third intersection. I was hoping we wouldn't find anything, that the first 2 were some kind of bizarre coincidence. No such luck. Same reversed signs, same undisturbed nails, same footprints leading nowhere. "This is a pattern," Dana said, her voice tight. "Someone's doing this deliberately, all in one night probably, and they're doing it in a way that doesn't make physical sense. People can't teleport, Dana. I know that. But explain those footprints. Explain how these signs got reversed without the nails being removed." I couldn't. We fixed the third set of signs and continued our patrol, both of us on edge now, constantly scanning the woods around us. The fourth and final intersection was at the junction where the trail crossed the Pemigewasset River. This was a critical marker because a wrong turn here could lead hikers miles off course into some of the most remote backcountry in the Whites. When we arrived, my heart sank. The signs were reversed here too, but this time there was something else. Someone had left a message. Carved into the wooden post, below the directional signs, were 4 words scratched into the wood with what looked like a knife. "They're going the wrong way." Dana and I stood there, staring at the message as rain began to fall. Light at first, then heavier, drumming on the leaves around us. "Who's going the wrong way?" Dana asked. "I don't know." I pulled out my radio, but before I could key it, Dana grabbed my arm. "Listen," she whispered. I stopped, listening. At first, I didn't hear anything except the rain. Then I caught it, footsteps, someone walking through the underbrush maybe 50 yards to our east, moving parallel to the trail. "Hello?" I called out. "This is Park Ranger Whitaker. Identify yourself." The The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then they started again, moving away this time, faster, crashing through the underbrush like someone running. "Hey!" Dana shouted. "Stop! We need to talk to you!" But whoever it was didn't stop. We heard them for maybe another 30 seconds, then nothing. Just the sound of rain and our own breathing. I got on the radio. "Base, this is Whitaker. We've got a possible suspect fleeing the scene at the Pemigewasset Junction. Male or female unknown, heading east off trail at high speed. All 4 intersections on the northern loop have been tampered with. Someone carved a message on the last post. They're going the wrong way." Rick's voice came back immediately, more urgent now. "I'm calling it in to state police and alerting the other ranger stations. Do you want to pursue?" I looked at Dana. She shook her head slightly. Chasing someone through the woods in the rain, with visibility dropping and the terrain getting more dangerous, was a good way to get hurt. "Negative," I said. "We're going to secure the scene and head back. But Rick, we need to talk about shutting down this section until we figure out what's going on." "Agreed. Get back here safe." We spent another 20 minutes documenting the scene, photographing the carved message, the reversed signs, and yes, those same impossible footprints behind the post. Then we corrected the signs and started the long hike back to the ranger station. The rain got heavier as we walked, turning the trail into a stream of running water. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what we'd found. Someone had systematically reversed every trail marker on the northern loop, somehow doing it without leaving evidence of tampering, and then carved a cryptic message suggesting that hikers were going the wrong way. But going the wrong way where? The markers were standard directional signs. North meant north, south meant south. There was no wrong way, unless you counted hikers who were heading in a direction they didn't intend to go. "Elaine," Dana said as we walked, "what if this isn't about the hikers?" "What do you mean?" "What if whoever's doing this thinks the signs themselves are wrong? Like, they think the official trail markers are incorrect, and they're fixing them?" I thought about that. But the signs aren't wrong. We survey these routes constantly. The markers are accurate. I know that. But what if someone doesn't believe that? What if someone thinks they know better? It was an interesting theory, but it raised more questions than it answered. Who would think they knew the trail better than the National Park Service? And how the hell were they reversing signs without leaving evidence? We made it back to the ranger station by late afternoon, soaked and exhausted. Rick had hot coffee waiting for us, and the state police had already sent a trooper who was sitting in the break room reviewing our photos. The trooper's name was Officer Martinez, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened to our report without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a small notebook. When we finished, she looked up. "And you're certain the nails weren't removed and replaced?" "Positive," I said. The wood around the nail holes showed weathering and discoloration consistent with long-term placement. If someone had pulled those nails and put them back, there would be fresh scratches, torn wood fibers, something. What about the footprints? Any theories on how someone could leave prints that don't lead anywhere? Dana shook her head. "None that makes sense. The only way I could see it happening is if someone was dropped in by helicopter, did their work, and then was picked up again. But we would have heard a helicopter. Maybe not if it was early morning or late at night," Martinez suggested. "True, but a helicopter would leave other signs. Downdraft disturbing the vegetation, noise that would echo through the mountains. We had reports to file for any helicopter activity in our sector, and there's been none." Martinez closed her notebook. "I'm going to be honest with you. This is one of the stranger cases I've encountered. The vandalism itself isn't that unusual. We get people messing with trail markers sometimes, usually teenagers or drunk hikers. But the way it's being done, the lack of evidence, the cryptic message, That's concerning. What do you suggest? I asked. For now, increased patrols. I'll have officers drive through the area at night, see if we can catch anyone in the act. And you should install trail cameras at those intersections, see if we can get footage of whoever's doing this. We can do that, Rick said from behind the desk. I'll get the cameras ordered today. Good. Martinez stood up. In the meantime, make sure to warn any hikers in the area to pay extra attention to trail markers and to report anything unusual. After Martinez left, Dana and I sat in the break room, drinking coffee and trying to warm up. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something obvious, some detail that would make all of this make sense. The message, Dana said suddenly. They're going the wrong way, not you're going the wrong way. They, like whoever wrote it was watching hikers and thought they were heading in the wrong direction. Or like they're not even talking to the hikers, I said, following her logic. Like they're talking to us, to the rangers, telling us that the hikers are going the wrong way because of our signs. So they reverse them. Yeah, in their mind, they're fixing a problem. Dana set down her coffee cup. We need to find this person before someone gets hurt. If they keep messing with trail markers, eventually a hiker is going to get lost, and in this terrain, that could be fatal. She was right. The White Mountains were beautiful, but deadly. Every year, people died up here, from falls, hypothermia, heart attacks brought on by exertion. If someone got turned around because of reversed trail markers, they could end up in serious trouble. That night, I went home to my small cabin on the edge of the national forest. But I barely slept. I kept thinking about those footprints, appearing and disappearing like ghosts, and that carved message. They're going the wrong way. Who was going the wrong way? And more importantly, who thought they had the right to change the trail? The trail cameras arrived 2 days later. High-quality units with night vision and motion sensors. Dana and I installed them at all 4 intersections, hiding them in trees with good sight lines to the signposts. If our mystery vandal came back, we'd get them on film. For the next week, nothing happened. We checked the cameras daily, reviewed the footage, but all we captured were deer, a black bear passing through, and the occasional legitimate hiker consulting the trail signs. Then, on the 8th day, we got a hit. I was in the ranger station going through the morning's footage when I saw it. The timestamp read 3:47 a.m. and the location was the Pemigewasset Junction, the one where we'd found the carved message. A figure appeared on screen, moving into frame from the left. They were wearing dark clothing and a backpack, and their face was obscured by a hood. They walked directly to the signpost and stood there for a moment, just looking at it. Then they reached into their backpack. I expected to see them pull out tools, a hammer or screwdriver to remove the signs. Instead, they pulled out what looked like a small notebook and a flashlight. They opened the notebook, consulted it, then looked back at the signs. And then they did something that made my blood run cold. They touched the signs, just touched them, running their fingers along the wood, tracing the arrows. And as they did, the camera's night vision picked up something strange. The person's hands were shaking, trembling visibly even through the grainy footage. They stood there for almost 5 minutes, touching the signs, consulting their notebook, and I could see their lips moving like they were talking to themselves. Then they put the notebook away and walked off screen to the right, in the direction of the overlapping footprints we'd found. I immediately called Dana and Rick into the office to watch the footage. "That's them," Rick said. "That's gotta be our vandal." "But they didn't reverse the signs," Dana pointed out. "They just touched them. What does that mean?" "Maybe they were checking their work from before," I suggested. "Or maybe the camera scared them off." We watched the footage 3 more times, trying to glean any identifying details. The person was of medium height, maybe 5'8" or 5'9". Their build suggested male, but we couldn't be certain. The clothing was nondescript: dark jacket, dark pants, hiking boots. "Can we get this enhanced?" I asked Rick. "Maybe get a better look at their face?" "I'll send it to state police. They have better equipment than we do." But even as he said it, I wasn't hopeful. The person had been careful to keep their face hidden, and the camera angle wasn't ideal. Dana pulled up the footage from the other 3 cameras. "Nothing at Crawford Notch or Zealand Falls, but look at this." She showed me footage from the camera at the 3rd intersection, the one on Mount Washington's southern approach. Same timestamp, 3:47 a.m. Same figure, same dark clothing, same behavior. Touching the signs, consulting the notebook, lips moving. "How is that possible?" Rick asked. "Those intersections are miles apart. No way someone could be at both locations at the exact same time." "Unless there are 2 of them," Dana said quietly. I felt a chill run down my spine. 2 people working together, systematically targeting our trail markers. That would explain the 2 sets of footprints. But it raised a whole new set of questions. Over the next few days, we increased our patrols and kept close watch on the cameras. The state police sent back the enhanced footage, but it didn't help much. The person's face remained obscured, and there were no identifying marks or features visible. Then, on a cold Tuesday morning, everything changed. Dana and I were doing our regular patrol when we got a call from Rick. "Elaine, we've got a lost hiker situation. Woman called in from the Pemigewasset Junction. Says she's been hiking for 3 days and she's completely turned around. She thinks she should be near Mount Washington by now, but she's nowhere close." "How did she get that lost?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "She says she's been following the white blazes and the trail signs, but they led her in circles. She's exhausted, running low on food, and starting to panic. We're on our way. What's her exact location?" Rick gave us the coordinates, and Dana and I picked up our pace, heading toward the junction. It took us 45 minutes of hard hiking to reach her. The woman was in her 30s, fit and experienced looking, but clearly exhausted and frustrated. Her name was Jennifer Katz, and she'd been attempting a section hike from Crawford Notch to Mount Washington, a 3-day journey that should have been straightforward. "I don't understand what happened," she said, close to tears. "I've hiked this trail before. I know how to navigate." But the signs kept pointing me in directions that didn't match my map. Dana and I exchanged glances. "Tell us exactly what happened," I said gently. Jennifer pulled out her trail map and showed us her planned route. "I started here at Crawford Notch on Friday morning. The signs pointed me north, so I followed them. But after a few hours, I realized I wasn't where I should be. I was heading south instead of north." "You're sure about that?" "Positive. I have a compass. I checked it against the trail markers, and they were definitely sending me the wrong direction." My stomach tightened. "What did you do then?" "I backtracked to the last intersection and tried again, but the same thing happened. It's like the trail markers were deliberately trying to get me lost." "Did you see anyone else on the trail?" Dana asked. "Anyone acting suspicious?" Jennifer thought about it. "No. The trail was pretty empty. I saw maybe 2 other hikers the whole time, and neither of them stopped to talk." We got Jennifer sorted out, gave her food and water, and started walking her back toward the ranger station. But my mind was racing. Our vandal had caused exactly what we'd feared. A lost hiker. Jennifer was experienced and lucky, but the next person might not be. "We need to catch this person," I told Dana as we walked, "before someone gets seriously hurt." That night, I volunteered for an overnight patrol. Dana wanted to come, but I convinced her to stay behind and monitor the trail cameras. If our vandal showed up again, we'd be ready. I set up at the Pemigewasset Junction around midnight, hiding in a cluster of spruce trees about 30 yards from the signpost. I had a clear view of the trail in both directions, night vision binoculars, and my radio set to vibrate in case Dana needed to reach me. The woods at night are never truly silent. There are always sounds, owls hunting, branches creaking, the occasional rustle of small animals in the underbrush. But around 3 o'clock a.m., the sounds changed. I heard footsteps, human footsteps, deliberate and measured, coming from the north. I raised my binoculars and scanned the trail. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, a figure emerged from the darkness, moving steadily toward the junction. It was them. Same dark clothing, same backpack, same hood pulled low to obscure their face. They approached the signpost and stopped, reaching into their backpack just like in the footage. They pulled out the notebook and flashlight, and I could see now that their hands were indeed shaking. I waited, watching. I wanted to see them actually reverse the signs, to understand how they were doing it. But they didn't touch the signs. They just stood there, staring at them, their lips moving rapidly like they were having an argument with someone I couldn't see. Then they did something unexpected. They pulled out a small tool from their pack. It looked like a level, the kind carpenters use, and they held it up to the directional arrows, checking to see if they were straight. After a moment, they seemed satisfied. They put the level away, made a note in their notebook, and then walked away, heading south on the trail. I made a split-second decision. I radioed Dana. I've got visual on the suspect. They're heading south from Pemigewasset. I'm going to follow. Be careful. Dana's voice crackled back. I waited until the figure was about 50 yards ahead. Then I started following, moving as quietly as I could. The person maintained a steady pace, never looking back, completely focused on the trail ahead. We walked for maybe 20 minutes, moving deeper into the forest. Then the person veered off trail, heading west into a section of woods I knew led to an old, abandoned ranger station. The station had been decommissioned in the 1980s, when a newer facility was built closer to the road. It was just a small cabin now, boarded up and marked for eventual demolition. The person walked right up to it, produced a key, and went inside. I waited in the tree line, watching. A light flickered on inside, visible through cracks in the boarded windows. I radioed Dana again, whispering, "Suspect has entered the old ranger station at Sector 7. I'm going to make contact. Wait for backup." Dana insisted, "Don't go in alone." But I was already moving. I approached the cabin carefully, my hand on my pepper spray, and knocked on the door. "Park Ranger," I called out. "Open the door, please." Silence. Then I heard movement inside, shuffling footsteps, something falling. The light went out. "Sir or ma'am, I need you to open this door. You're trespassing on federal property." More silence. Then, finally, a voice. Male, older, rough. "Go away." "I can't do that. You need to come out and talk to me." "I said go away." The voice was louder now, edged with panic. "You don't understand. You're all doing it wrong." "Doing what wrong?" "The trail, the markers, everything. It's all wrong." I tried a different approach, keeping my voice calm. "My name is Elaine. I'm a ranger here. Why don't you come out and we can talk about this?" There was a long pause. Then the door creaked open, just a crack, and I saw a face peering out. An older man, maybe 60 or 65, with a long gray beard and wild eyes. "You're a ranger?" he asked, his voice suspicious. "I am. Have been for 11 years. "Then you should know. You should know they're all wrong." "Know what's wrong?" He opened the door wider, and I could see him clearly now. He was wearing old ranger gear, the kind we used to issue 20 years ago. His jacket had a name tag. R. Mitchell. "The trail markers," he said, his voice intense. "They've been wrong for years, decades. I've been trying to fix them, but there are too many wrong signs leading people the wrong way. Mr. Mitchell, I need you to step outside. We need to talk about this." He shook his head violently. No, you'll just tell me I'm wrong, just like the others. But I'm not wrong. I was a ranger for 32 years. I know this trail better than anyone, and I know when something's off. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Dana had arrived with backup, 2 state police officers. Mitchell saw them and tried to shut the door, but I put my foot in the way. "Mr. Mitchell, please. No one's going to hurt you. We just want to talk." "Talk?" He laughed, a bitter sound. "You want to talk? Then tell me why the trail runs north when it should run northwest. Tell me why the markers at Crawford Notch point hikers toward a ridge that wasn't even part of the original survey. Tell me why no one listened when I tried to report it." One of the officers stepped forward. "Sir, I need you to come outside with your hands visible." Mitchell looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Not madness, but desperation. The look of someone who truly believed they were doing the right thing. "I was just trying to help," he said quietly. "I was just trying to fix what was broken." Then he stepped outside, hands raised, and the officers moved in to detain him. As they led him away, I noticed something. His boots, Merrill brand, well-worn, men's size 10, the same boots that had made those prints in the mud. But there was only one set of prints here. Where were the smaller prints from? The women's 7? I searched the cabin after Mitchell was taken away. Inside, I found maps covering every surface, hand-drawn charts showing the trail with markers and notes. Sections were circled in red, marked wrong or needs correction. There were notebooks filled with coordinates, measurements, and long rambling entries about survey errors and magnetic declination. And in the corner, I found another pair of boots. Women's size 7, muddy and worn. Mitchell had been working alone, changing boots to confuse anyone tracking him, stepping in his own footprints to make it look like 2 people. It was clever, but it was also deeply sad. Robert Mitchell, we learned, had been a ranger in the White Mountains from 1975 to 2007, when he retired at the age of 65. By all accounts, he'd been an excellent ranger, knowledgeable, dedicated, and respected by his colleagues. But something had changed after his retirement. Dana and I sat in on Mitchell's interview with the state police. He was calm now, medicated and assessed by a psychiatrist, but still convinced of his mission. The original survey was done in 1926, he explained, sitting across from us in the interview room. They used compasses and theodolites, marking the trail based on what they thought was true north, but they didn't account for magnetic declination changes over time. "Magnetic declination?" Officer Martinez asked. "The difference between true north and magnetic north," I explained. "It shifts over time as the Earth's magnetic field changes." Mitchell nodded eagerly. "Exactly. The declination in the White Mountains has shifted almost 2 degrees since 1926. That might not sound like much, but over miles of trail, it adds up. The markers are pointing people in slightly wrong directions, and nobody's fixing it." "But Mr. Mitchell," Dana said gently, "we update our markers regularly. We use GPS now, not compasses. The markers are accurate." "GPS?" Mitchell's face darkened. "GPS is wrong too. It's based on satellites, and satellites drift. The only constant is the land itself. I surveyed this trail for 32 years. I know where it should go." The psychiatrist who'd evaluated Mitchell diagnosed him with obsessive-compulsive disorder that had likely been present but manageable during his working years. After retirement, without the structure of his job, the obsession had grown, consuming his life until all he could think about were those wrong trail markers. He'd been living in that abandoned ranger station for almost a year, surviving on supplies he bought in town and food he foraged. Every night, he'd hike out to different sections of the trail, checking markers, reversing the ones he thought were incorrect, and documenting everything in his notebooks. How was he reversing the signs without removing the nails? Dana asked the investigating officer. He wasn't, the officer said, showing us photos taken at the cabin. Look at this. The photos showed Mitchell's workbench. On it were several wooden directional signs, exact replicas of the ones we used on the trail. He'd been hand carving them, aging the wood with chemicals to make them look weathered, and then swapping them out for the real signs under cover of darkness. He'd remove the real signs, take them back to his cabin, and replace them with his own versions pointing what he considered the correct directions, the officer explained. The nails were never removed from the posts. He just lifted the signs off and put new ones on using the existing holes. That's why there was no evidence of tampering. It was brilliant in a disturbing way. Mitchell had known exactly how our investigation would work, how we'd look for signs of tampering, and he'd outsmarted us by making replicas. What about the footprints? I asked. The officer pulled up photos of the boots they'd found in Mitchell's cabin. He wore different boots at different times, creating the illusion of multiple people. And he was careful about his approach, sometimes coming in from one direction and leaving from another, or stepping in his own tracks to confuse the trail. But the most unsettling discovery came when we examined Mitchell's notebooks more carefully. In them, he'd documented every hiker he'd seen on the trail for the past year. Names from logbooks, physical descriptions, what direction they were heading. And next to many of the entries, he'd written, "wrong way," or "corrected." He was watching them, Dana said quietly, reading through the notebooks, watching hikers, and deciding whether they were going the right direction based on his beliefs. Jennifer Katz was in there. Mitchell had seen her at Crawford Notch and noted that she was heading the wrong direction for Mount Washington. He'd reversed the signs specifically to redirect her onto what he considered the correct route. Except his route would have taken her miles off course into some of the most remote and dangerous terrain in the Whites. He genuinely thought he was helping, the psychiatrist told us. In his mind, the trail markers were dangerous, and he was performing a public service by correcting them. The fact that he was actually putting people in danger didn't register. He couldn't see past his obsession. Mitchell was charged with vandalism, trespassing, and reckless endangerment. But given his age and mental state, the DA agreed to drop the criminal charges in exchange for Mitchell accepting psychiatric treatment and agreeing to stay out of the national forest. His family, who we tracked down in Vermont, hadn't heard from him in over a year. They knew he'd been struggling after retirement, but had no idea he'd been living in the woods. He loved that job, his daughter told us when she came to pick him up. It was his whole life. When they made him retire, it was like he lost his purpose. I should have seen this coming. After Mitchell was taken away for treatment, Dana and I were tasked with recovering all of his homemade trail markers and restoring the real ones. We found 17 signs scattered across the northern section, each one a perfect replica right down to the weathering and grain of the wood. He really was talented, Dana said, examining one of the fake signs. If we hadn't been looking for them specifically, we might never have noticed the difference. We also found his survey equipment in the cabin, ancient theodolites and compasses from the 1970s, along with maps showing his proposed corrections to the entire Appalachian Trail through New Hampshire. He was planning to rework the entire trail, I said, looking at the maps. This wasn't just about our section. He thought the whole thing was wrong. It took us 2 weeks to verify that all the trail markers in our district were correct and hadn't been tampered with. We installed additional trail cameras and increased patrols, though we didn't expect Mitchell to come back. But the case stayed with me. One evening, about a month after Mitchell's arrest, I was sitting in the ranger station reviewing some of his notebooks when I noticed something. His measurements, his coordinates, they were incredibly detailed and precise. More precise than they needed to be for someone just obsessed with correcting trail markers. I pulled out our current trail maps and compared them to Mitchell's hand-drawn versions. And that's when I saw it. In one section, near the presidential range, Mitchell's proposed route actually did diverge from our official trail, but not because of magnetic declination. It diverged because our trail, which had been rerouted in '98 due to erosion, now ran close to an unstable slope that had been slowly deteriorating. Mitchell had noted it in his journal. New route unsafe. Original survey avoided this ridge for good reason. Recommend immediate correction. I checked our recent inspection reports. Sure enough, there were notes about increased erosion and small rock slides in that section. We'd been monitoring it but hadn't considered rerouting yet. But Mitchell had seen it. His 32 years of experience had told him that section was dangerous, and in his obsessive way, he'd been trying to warn us. I brought it to our supervisor's attention, and after a thorough geological survey, we agreed to reroute that section of trail back to something closer to Mitchell's proposed route. It was a small vindication for a man who'd lost himself in his obsession, but it made me think, how much of what Mitchell had done was genuine madness, and how much was the desperate attempt of an expert whose warnings had been ignored. I visited Mitchell once, after he'd been in treatment for a few months. He was staying at a care facility in Concord, medicated but lucid. He didn't remember much about his time in the woods, or claimed not to. But when I showed him photos of the rerouted trail section, his eyes lit up. "That's right," he said, nodding. "That's how it should have been all along. The original surveyors knew what they were doing. We should have listened to them." "Mr. Mitchell," I said carefully, "you were right about that section being unstable. Your experience and knowledge probably prevented a serious accident. But the way you went about trying to fix it, reversing signs, living in the woods, that wasn't the answer." He looked at me, and for a moment his eyes were clear and focused. I know that now. But when you've spent your whole life doing something, believing in something, it's hard to accept when people tell you you're wrong, even when you are. Dana and I still patrol the northern section, and we still check those trail markers religiously. But I find myself looking at them differently now, wondering what Robert Mitchell would think, whether he'd approve or see some new error that needs correcting. The trail cameras are still up, and occasionally we catch footage of hikers stopping at the intersections, consulting their maps, checking the signs. They have no idea about the man who spent months living in the woods, convinced he was saving them from going the wrong way. And maybe, in his own broken way, he thought he was. The Appalachian Trail is more than just a path through the mountains. It's a living thing, constantly changing, constantly being maintained and updated by people who care about it. People like Robert Mitchell, who loved it so much it drove him a little bit mad. I sometimes wonder if there are others like him out there, other retired rangers or hikers who've spent so much time on the trail that they start to see things differently, to believe they understand it better than anyone else. The woods have a way of getting into your head if you spend enough time alone in them. They whisper things, show you patterns that might not be there, make you question what's real, and what's just the shadow of trees in the fog. Mitchell's notebooks are stored in our evidence locker now, hundreds of pages of observations, measurements, and increasingly paranoid theories about trail corruption and deliberate misdirection. Near the end, the entries get darker, suggesting that they were working against him, changing signs after he'd corrected them, trying to make him look crazy. But there was no they. There was just a lonely man fighting a battle against invisible enemies, trying to hold on to the purpose that had defined his life for 3 decades. The last entry in his final notebook, written the night before we found him, simply says, "I can't fix them all. There are too many, but I tried. I hope someone understands that I tried." I understand, Mr. Mitchell. I understand that you tried. And sometimes, on quiet nights when I'm out on patrol, walking the same trails you walked for 32 years, I think I can almost see why you did what you did. The need to protect, to correct, to make sure people don't go the wrong way. But I also know that sometimes the wrong way isn't about direction. It's about losing sight of why we're on the path in the first place. The trail markers are all corrected now, pointing true according to GPS and modern surveying techniques. Hikers come through daily, following the white blazes, consulting the signs, making their way from Georgia to Maine or Maine to Georgia, depending on their direction. And somewhere in a care facility in Concord, an old ranger sits by a window, looking out at the distant mountains, probably wondering if anyone's checking the markers, if anyone's making sure they're right. They are, Mr. Mitchell. We're checking them. And we remember what you taught us, that sometimes the obsession that drives us to protect something can become the very thing that destroys us. The reversed trail markers are gone now, replaced with the originals. But the mystery of those impossible footprints, the ones that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, that one we solved. It wasn't ghosts, it wasn't magic. It was just a man who loved the trail so much that he forgot the difference between helping and harming, between protecting and controlling. And in the end, that might be the scariest thing of all. But the story didn't end there. 3 months after Mitchell's arrest, I received a package at the ranger station. It was from his daughter, Sarah, and inside was a letter along with something that made my hands shake when I pulled it out. Mitchell's original ranger badge from 1975. The letter explained that her father had asked her to send it to me. He wanted me to have it, she wrote, because I'd treated him with dignity when I could have just written him off as crazy. The badge was tarnished with age. The metal worn smooth in places from decades of wear, but the inscription was still clear. Robert J. Mitchell, Park Ranger, White Mountain National Forest. There was also a handwritten note from Mitchell himself. Ranger Whitaker, I know what I did was wrong. The doctors have helped me understand that my thinking wasn't right, that I was hurting people instead of helping them. But I want you to know that every night I spent out there, I genuinely believed I was doing my duty. A ranger's first responsibility is to keep people safe. I lost sight of what that meant. Please take care of the trail I loved, and please, if you can, understand that I never meant any harm. R. Mitchell. I kept that badge in my desk drawer for weeks, taking it out occasionally and running my fingers over the worn metal. It became a reminder not just of Mitchell's story, but of something larger. The fine line between dedication and obsession, between expertise and arrogance. Dana and I started interviewing some of Mitchell's old colleagues, rangers who'd worked with him during his 3 decades of service. What we learned painted a more complete picture of the man. Tom Hendricks, who'd been Mitchell's supervisor in the 1990s, told us about a rescue mission in '97 where Mitchell had saved a family of 4 trapped by a sudden snowstorm. He knew those mountains better than anyone I'd ever met, Tom said. He could navigate by landmarks alone, didn't even need a compass half the time. That family would have died if Bob hadn't known exactly where to find them. Another former colleague, Maria Santos, remembered Mitchell's meticulous attention to detail. He kept notebooks on everything: weather patterns, animal migration routes, which sections of trail needed maintenance. Some people thought he was too intense, but that intensity saved lives more than once. but they also noticed changes in his final years of service. He started arguing with the new GPS systems, Tom told us. Said they were going to make rangers lazy, that we'd lose the traditional skills that had kept the trail safe for generations. He wasn't entirely wrong, but he couldn't accept that technology could be a tool rather than a replacement. When Mitchell retired in 2007, several colleagues tried to stay in touch, but he gradually withdrew. He'd call sometimes, Maria said, always about the trail. Never about how he was doing, never about his family, just the trail. I should have recognized the signs. The psychiatrist treating Mitchell, Dr. Raymond Carter, agreed to speak with me about the case, with Mitchell's permission. What happened to Robert is unfortunately not uncommon among people who define themselves entirely by their profession, Dr. Carter explained. When that identity is removed, through retirement or other circumstances, some individuals struggle to find meaning. In Robert's case, his expertise became an obsession, and that obsession filled the void left by retirement. Could this have been prevented? I asked. Possibly. If there had been better support structures for retired rangers, if his family had recognized the warning signs earlier, if he'd sought help when he first started fixating on the trail markers. But Robert is also a product of a generation that didn't talk about mental health. He saw his struggles as a personal failing rather than a medical condition. 6 months after Mitchell entered treatment, Dana and I were doing a routine patrol when we found something that stopped us both cold. At the Crawford Notch Junction, someone had carved new words into the signpost. Not Mitchell. He was still in the care facility. Someone else. The carving read, "RM was right. Keep checking." We documented it, reported it, but we never found out who'd done it. What we did discover, though, was that several retired rangers in the area had been quietly discussing Mitchell's case, and some of them had started their own review of trail markers in their sections. One retired ranger, a woman named Beth Calloway, actually sent us a detailed report about inconsistencies she'd found in her old patrol area in Vermont. Unlike Mitchell, she worked through proper channels, submitting her findings to the Park Service for official review. Bob Mitchell might have lost his way, she wrote in her cover letter, but that doesn't mean his concerns were entirely unfounded. We owe it to him and to the hikers we serve to take a serious look at whether our systems are as accurate as we believe them to be. It sparked a conversation I hadn't expected. The Park Service commissioned a comprehensive review of trail markers throughout the White Mountains, using both GPS and traditional surveying methods. They found that Mitchell had been right about more than just that one unstable section. Several markers were slightly off, not enough to cause serious problems, but enough that his trained eye had caught them. The review resulted in recommendations for more frequent marker inspections, and a system for retired rangers to submit concerns through official channels. They even created a volunteer program allowing experienced former rangers to assist with trail maintenance, giving them a way to stay connected to the work they loved. In a strange way, Mitchell's breakdown had led to improvements he'd been advocating for all along. I visited him again after he'd been in treatment for almost a year. He looked better, healthier, more present. The wild look in his eyes was gone, replaced by something calmer, but also sadder. "I heard about the review," he said, when I sat down across from him. "Sarah told me they found some errors." "You were right about several things," I admitted. "The Park Service is making changes based on what you documented." He nodded slowly. "I wish I'd done it differently. Submitted reports, worked with people instead of against them. But toward the end, I couldn't think straight. All I could see were the wrong markers, and all I could think about was fixing them before someone got hurt." "Did something happen?" I asked gently. "Something that triggered this?" Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, In 2006, my last year before retirement, a hiker died on my section of the trail. Young woman, 23 years old. She got lost in a storm, went the wrong way at a junction, ended up hypothermic. We found her the next day, but it was too late. He looked down at his hands. The investigation said the markers were fine, that she just made a bad decision in poor visibility. But I kept thinking, what if the marker was slightly off? What if she followed it exactly and it still led her wrong? I couldn't stop thinking about it. And after I retired, with nothing else to occupy my mind, those thoughts just grew and grew until they were all I had. That wasn't your fault, I said. I know that now. Dr. Carter has helped me understand that I was looking for someone to blame, and I ended up blaming the markers, the system, everything except the real truth. That sometimes, despite our best efforts, people die in the wilderness. It's not always because someone did something wrong. Sometimes it's just tragic. Before I left, Mitchell asked me one more question. The trail, is it okay? Are people safe? Yes, I told him. People are safe. And rangers like you, the work you did for 32 years, that's a big part of why. He smiled then, a genuine smile. Good. That's all I ever wanted. Dana and I still patrol the northern section, but we do it differently now. We pay more attention to the small details, the things an experienced ranger like Mitchell would have noticed. We check markers more carefully, document discrepancies, and we're not afraid to question systems when something seems off. And we've started a tradition. Once a year, on the anniversary of finding Mitchell at that old ranger station, we hike to each of the 4 junctions he'd targeted. We check the markers, we maintain the areas around them, and we leave a small stone cairn nearby. It's not official, it's not in our job description, but it feels right. A way of honoring a ranger who cared too much rather than too little. Last month, Sarah Mitchell called me. Her father had been released from the care facility and was living with her family in Vermont. He's doing well, she said. Taking his medication, seeing his therapist weekly. He's even started volunteering at a local nature center, teaching kids about wilderness safety. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely happy to hear it. He wanted me to ask you something, Sarah continued. He's been working on a guidebook, a compilation of everything he learned during his 32 years as a ranger. Traditional navigation techniques, wilderness survival, things he's worried are being lost. He wants to know if you'd be willing to review it, make sure he's not, going off the rails again. I agreed, without hesitation. The manuscript arrived 2 weeks later, over 300 pages of detailed, meticulously researched information about the White Mountains. It was brilliant, the work of someone who'd spent a lifetime learning the land. There were no conspiracy theories, no rants about wrong markers. Just pure, useful knowledge presented clearly and accurately. In the introduction, Mitchell wrote, "This book is dedicated to all the rangers who came before me and all who will come after. The wilderness doesn't care about our technology or our expertise. It simply exists, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. Our job is to help people experience that beauty while respecting that danger. I spent many years forgetting that balance. I hope this book helps others maintain it." I wrote back to Sarah, telling her the manuscript was excellent and suggesting publishers who might be interested. As far as I know, Mitchell is still working on it, refining it, preparing it for publication. And sometimes, when I'm out on patrol and I stop at one of those junctions, I think about him. About a man who loved the trail so much it nearly destroyed him, but who found his way back, not to the wilderness, but to himself. The Appalachian Trail is still there, winding through the White Mountains, marked with white blazes and wooden signs that point the way. Hikers still follow it, some making it all the way from Georgia to Maine. others just walking a few miles to enjoy the view. And somewhere in Vermont, an old ranger sits at a desk, writing about the trail he loves, but this time, doing it the right way. My name is Lydia Monroe, and I've been a park ranger in the Catoctin Mountains of Maryland for 9 years. The Appalachian Trail cuts through our section for about 40 miles, winding through dense forest, rocky outcrops, and some of the most beautiful and unforgiving terrain on the East Coast. We get all kinds of hikers through here. Through hikers attempting the full Georgia to Maine journey, section hikers doing smaller chunks, and increasingly, trail runners. Trail runners are a different breed. Where hikers move at 2 or 3 miles per hour, stopping to enjoy views and eat lunch, trail runners blast through at 8 or 9 miles per hour, sometimes covering marathon distances in a single day. They carry minimal gear, just water, maybe some energy gels, and they know the trail like the back of their hand. Or at least they think they do. It was early September when Marcus Taylor went missing. The weather had been strange that week, unseasonably warm days followed by cold nights that left everything damp with condensation. Fog rolled through the mountains every morning, thick enough that you couldn't see 20 feet in front of you until almost noon. Marcus was 32 years old, an experienced trail runner who'd completed dozens of ultras, those insane 50 or 100-mile races through the mountains. He'd posted on social media the night before about planning a sunrise run through our section, aiming to cover about 25 miles before work. His girlfriend reported him missing when he didn't show up at his car by 10 a.m. Aaron, Pike, and I got the call around 11 a.m. Aaron had been my patrol partner for 4 years, a solid ranger with a background in search and rescue. He was methodical, where I was intuitive, cautious where I was sometimes too quick to act. We balanced each other out. Missing trail runner, dispatch told us. Last known location was the parking area at Wolfsville Road. He started his run at 5:30 a.m. Girlfriend has his route planned out on their shared running app. Send us the route, I said, already grabbing my pack and checking my radio battery. The route came through on my phone a minute later. Marcus had planned a loop starting at Wolfsville Road, heading north on the AT for 12 miles, then cutting east on a connector trail and looping back south. Total distance, 25 miles. For an experienced ultra runner like Marcus, that should have taken him 4 to 5 hours, putting him back at his car by 10:30 at the latest. But he never made it back. Aaron and I started at the parking area where Marcus's car sat alone, a blue Subaru with trail running stickers covering the back window. His girlfriend Rebecca was there, pacing nervously. "He always texts me when he's done," she said, her voice tight with worry. "Always. Even if it's just a thumbs up emoji, but nothing. I've been calling, and it goes straight to voicemail." "Does he usually carry his phone while running?" Aaron asked. "No, he leaves it in the car. But he wears a GPS watch, a Garmin. It tracks his route, his pace, everything. And it syncs to the app when he gets back to his car." I looked at the planned route again. "Has his watch synced at all this morning?" Rebecca shook her head. "Nothing. It only syncs when he's within range of his phone." "Okay," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We're going to hike his planned route. There are a lot of reasons he might be delayed, twisted ankle, stopped to help another hiker, decided to add extra miles. We'll find him." But even as I said it, something felt off. Marcus was too experienced to go out without telling anyone if he was changing his route, and the fog that morning had been thick, the kind that turned familiar trails into confusing mazes. Aaron and I set out north on the AT, moving fast but carefully, our eyes scanning both sides of the trail for any sign of Marcus. We called his name every few minutes, our voices swallowed by the dense forest. The fog was starting to lift by then, revealing patches of blue sky between the trees, but the trail was still slick with moisture. I could see fresh footprints in the mud, several sets from early morning hikers and runners. "Here," Aaron said, stopping at a particularly muddy section. "Running shoe tread, fresh, could be him." The prints were deep and evenly spaced, the pattern of someone moving fast and confident. We followed them for about 2 miles before they disappeared onto a rockier section of trail. We'd been hiking for almost an hour when I saw something that made me stop cold. Off the trail, maybe 10 feet into the woods, something was lying on the ground, something black and rectangular. "Aaron," I called out, pointing. We moved carefully off the trail, watching where we stepped. As we got closer, I could see what it was. A GPS watch, the band broken, lying face up in the leaves. I pulled on gloves before picking it up. The screen was cracked, but still displaying information. I felt my stomach drop when I saw what it showed. "Aaron, look at this." The watch face displayed the last completed activity. Distance, 7.4 miles, duration 52 minutes. Elevation gain, 1,847 feet. But that wasn't the strangest part. I pressed the button to view the GPS route and my blood ran cold. The route was a perfect circle. Not a loop, but an actual circle. As precise as if someone had drawn it with a compass. And the location where the circle was centered wasn't on the trail. It wasn't even in the forest. According to the GPS data, Marcus had run in a perfect circle on top of Raven's Cliff, a sheer rock face about 3 miles northwest of where we stood. There was no trail up there. There was barely any way to even access it without technical climbing gear. "This doesn't make sense," Aaron said, staring at the screen. "GPS watches don't malfunction like this. They might lose signal, but they don't create perfect geometric shapes." I looked at the elevation data. It showed Marcus climbing nearly 2,000 feet in 52 minutes, then the recording just stopped. "We need to get to Raven's Cliff," I said. "Lydia, that's serious terrain. If he went up there somehow, I know. Call it in. We need search and rescue on standby." While Aaron radioed dispatch, I examined the watch more carefully. The band had been torn, not cut. The edges were frayed like it had been ripped off. And there was something else, a small smear of what looked like blood on the underside of the band. This was no longer a missing person case. This was a potential rescue, or worse, a recovery. We stashed the watch in an evidence bag and marked the location with GPS coordinates. Then we started moving toward Raven's Cliff. The terrain got rougher as we went, the well-maintained AT giving way to rougher, less traveled paths. We were bushwhacking now, using our knowledge of the area and our GPS units to navigate toward the cliff face. It took us almost 90 minutes to reach the base of Raven's Cliff. The rock face loomed above us, a near-vertical wall of gray stone about 200 feet high. At the top, I could see the edge where the cliff dropped off, and beyond that, nothing but sky. "There's no way he ran up this," Aaron said, looking at the sheer face. "This requires climbing equipment, technical skills. Then how did his GPS say he was up there?" We split up, Aaron going left around the cliff base and me going right, both of us looking for any possible route to the top, any sign that Marcus had been there. I'd been searching for about 20 minutes when I found something that made my skin crawl. At the eastern edge of the cliff, where the rock face met a steep dirt slope, there was a narrow chimney, a vertical crack in the rock maybe 2 feet wide. It looked barely passable, the kind of thing only an experienced climber would attempt, and even then, only with proper gear. But at the base of that chimney, in a small patch of soft dirt, was a single footprint, not a full print, just the toe. The front third of a running shoe pressed deep into the dirt like someone had been on their tiptoes, reaching up. I radioed Aaron. "East side, I found something." When he arrived and saw the print, his face went pale. "That's a running shoe tread." "Yeah." We both looked up at the chimney. It disappeared into shadow about 30 feet up, but I could see handholds, places where someone might be able to climb if they were desperate or crazy enough. "He went up there," I said quietly. "Why would he do that? This isn't even close to his planned route." "I don't know, but his watch said he was at the top of this cliff, and here's a print suggesting he tried to climb it." Aaron pulled out his climbing rope. "I'm going up." "No. We call in the technical rescue team. This is beyond our training." "Lydia, if he's up there and he's hurt, we can't wait for a team to assemble and get here. That's at least 2 hours." I wanted to argue, but he was right. If Marcus had somehow made it to the top and was injured, time was critical. "Fine, but we do this safe. You climb, I belay, and we go slow." Aaron nodded and started gearing up. I anchored myself to a sturdy tree and set up the belay system while Aaron studied the chimney, planning his route. The climb was brutal to watch. The chimney was tight, forcing Aaron to use a technique called stemming, pressing his back against one wall and his feet against the other, inching upward. I could hear him breathing hard, grunting with effort, and twice he slipped, catching himself before falling but scaring us both. After 45 minutes, he made it to the top. I heard him call down, his voice strange and tight. "Lydia, you need to see this." "What is it? Did you find him?" "No, but there's something up here, something you're not going to believe." He set up an anchor point at the top and lowered a rope for me. I'm not a technical climber, but I've done enough scrambling in my years as a ranger to manage basic ascents. Still, that chimney tested every skill I had. When I finally pulled myself over the edge and onto the flat top of Raven's Cliff, I was sweating and shaking. But when I saw what Aaron was standing next to, I forgot all about the climb. In the center of the cliff top, there was a perfect circle, not drawn or painted, not made of rocks or sticks. The grass and moss growing on the thin soil covering the rock had died in a perfect circular pattern, about 20 feet in diameter. The dead vegetation was brown and desiccated, as if it had been burned or poisoned, but there was no smell of chemicals, no sign of fire. And in the exact center of that dead circle was a single item, Marcus Taylor's other shoe. Not both shoes, just the left one. Placed carefully, almost ceremonially, right in the middle of the circle. "What the hell?" I whispered. Aaron walked slowly around the perimeter of the dead circle, careful not to step inside it. The GPS route from his watch. It matched this, same size, same location. I pulled out my phone and brought up the saved GPS image from Marcus's watch. Aaron was right. If you overlaid the GPS track on a map of this cliff top, it would line up perfectly with the circle of dead vegetation. "He was here," I said. "He somehow made it up here, and he was here. But where is he now?" Aaron looked around the cliff top. There was nowhere to go. The cliff dropped off on 3 sides, and the 4th side, where we'd climbed up, was the only way down. I moved closer to the shoe, examining it without touching it. It was definitely a trail-running shoe, same brand Marcus wore according to his girlfriend. The laces were still tied. There was mud on the sole, and what looked like pine needles stuck in the tread. "Aaron, look at this." I pointed to the ground next to the shoe. There, pressed into the thin layer of soil on the rock, was a single toe print. Just like the one at the bottom of the chimney, the front third of a foot, pressed deep like someone standing on their tiptoes. But this print was facing outward, toward the cliff edge. He was standing on his toes, Aaron said slowly, facing the drop. We both walked carefully to the edge and looked down. 200 feet of sheer rock face, then trees and boulders at the bottom. If someone fell from here, they wouldn't survive. Aaron got on his radio. Dispatch, this is Pike. We need a full search and rescue team at Ravens Cliff, and we need to search the base. Possible fall victim. The next few hours were a blur. The technical rescue team arrived, along with a helicopter with thermal imaging. They searched the base of the cliff, looking for any sign of Marcus's body, but found nothing. No body, no blood, no torn clothing, nothing. Meanwhile, I documented everything at the top of the cliff. The dead circle, the shoe, the toe print. I took dozens of photos, measurements, soil samples from inside and outside the circle. As the sun started to set and we prepared to descend, I stood at the edge of the circle one more time, trying to make sense of what we'd found. Marcus had started a run at 5:30 a.m. Somehow, he'd left the trail and made his way to Ravens Cliff. He'd climbed a near vertical chimney without any gear, making it to the top. His GPS watch had recorded him running in a perfect circle for 7.4 miles, even though the circle was only about 60 feet in diameter. Then he'd taken off one shoe, placed it in the center, and what? Jumped? But we'd found no body at the base. Fallen? Same problem. Simply disappeared? That wasn't possible. As we descended the chimney in the gathering darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something obvious, some piece of the puzzle that would make all of this make sense. But I had no idea how wrong I was about what had actually happened on top of Ravens Cliff that morning. The investigation into Marcus Taylor's disappearance consumed the next 3 days. State police got involved, along with the FBI, since we now had a potential missing person case on federal land. The story hit the news, and suddenly Ravens Cliff was swarming with search teams, cadaver dogs, and volunteers. They found nothing. No body at the base of the cliff. No blood, no torn clothing, no sign of a fall or struggle. The dogs showed interest in the area around the chimney and at the top of the cliff, confirming Marcus had been there, but they couldn't pick up a trail leading anywhere else. It was like he'd climbed to the top of that cliff and simply ceased to exist. Rebecca, Marcus's girlfriend, was devastated. She'd been staying at a hotel in town, hoping for news, and I met with her several times to update her on our progress, or lack thereof. "It doesn't make any sense," she kept saying. "Marcus knew these trails. He'd run them dozens of times. Why would he suddenly decide to climb a cliff? He wasn't even a climber. He was afraid of heights." That detail stuck with me, afraid of heights. Yet, he'd somehow scaled a 200-foot cliff face using nothing but a narrow chimney crack. On the 4th day, Aaron and I returned to Ravens Cliff alone. The official search had been scaled back, the FBI focusing on other theories, including the possibility that Marcus had staged his disappearance for reasons unknown. But I didn't buy that. I'd seen his girlfriend's grief. I'd seen that toe print at the edge of the cliff. Something had happened up there, and I needed to understand what. We climbed the chimney again, easier this time now that we knew the route, and stood on the cliff top in the morning light. The dead circle was still there, the vegetation showing no signs of recovering. I'd sent the soil samples to a lab, but the results had come back inconclusive. No toxins, no radiation, no chemical burns. The plants had simply died, and no one could explain why. "I've been thinking about the GPS data," Aaron said, pulling out a printout of the route from Marcus's watch. A perfect circle, 7.4 miles long. That's impossible on a space this small. Even if he ran around the perimeter of this cliff top for hours, it wouldn't create a perfect circle. The GPS would show loops, irregularities. "Unless the watch was malfunctioning," I suggested. That's what the Garmin tech support said, but I sent them the watch and they analyzed it. No hardware failures, no software glitches. As far as they can tell, the watch accurately recorded what it was told to record. "Meaning what?" that Marcus actually did run 7.4 miles in a perfect circle on top of a cliff that's maybe 100 feet across. Aaron nodded slowly. That's what the data says. I walked to the center of the circle, to where we'd found the shoe. It had been bagged as evidence, but I remembered exactly how it had looked. Placed carefully, almost reverently, in the exact center. What if it wasn't just running? I said slowly, an idea forming. What if he was doing something else, some kind of ritual or ceremony? Marcus wasn't religious, Aaron countered. Rebecca said he was pretty hardcore atheist, science-minded. He worked as an engineer. Then what? What would make a rational, science-minded person climb a cliff they were afraid of and run in circles until they disappeared? We didn't have an answer. As we were preparing to descend, I noticed something I'd missed before. At the northern edge of the cliff top, partially hidden by a small boulder, there were scratches in the rock. Fresh ones. I called Aaron over. Look at this. The scratches weren't random. They formed letters, crude and uneven but readable. Can't stop. Jesus, Aaron muttered. He carved this? Had to be him. These are fresh, and we're the only ones who've been up here since he disappeared. Can't stop what? Running? I thought about the GPS data. The perfect circle. The 7.4 miles recorded in just 52 minutes. That would be a pace of about 7 minutes per mile, which was fast, but not impossible for an experienced runner like Marcus. But running in circles on top of a cliff for 52 minutes straight? That was different. That was obsessive. Compulsive. What if he couldn't stop? I said quietly. Literally couldn't stop running. Like something was compelling him to keep going in circles. That's not possible, Lydia. People don't just lose control of their bodies like that. Then explain the evidence, explain the perfect circle, explain why he wrote "can't stop" on the rock. Aaron didn't have an answer. We descended and headed back to the ranger station, where I spent the rest of the day going through missing person databases, looking for similar cases. What I found made my blood run cold. In the past 15 years, there had been 7 other disappearances on the Appalachian Trail in our general region. All of them were trail runners. All of them had been experienced athletes in good physical condition, and in 3 of the cases, their GPS watches had been recovered. All 3 showed the same pattern, a perfect circle, recorded shortly before they vanished. The locations were different. The circle sizes varied, but the pattern was identical. Runners leaving their planned routes, moving to remote locations, and running in circles until they disappeared. I called the lead investigators on those cases. 2 were retired, but I managed to reach them. Both remembered the cases vividly because of how strange they were. We figured the GPS units were malfunctioning, one former detective told me. What else could it be? But the families insisted their loved ones had been in perfect mental health, no signs of psychosis or suicidal ideation. We eventually ruled them as presumed dead, accidents or possible foul play, but we never found bodies. Did you find anything else unusual at the scenes? I asked. There was a pause. In 2 of the cases we found messages. One carved in a tree, the other written in mud. Both said the same thing. Can't stop. I thanked him and hung up, my hands shaking. This wasn't just about Marcus Taylor. This was a pattern, something that had been happening for over a decade, and no one had connected the dots. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those runners, compelled by something unknown to run in circles until they vanished. The image of Marcus standing on his toes at the edge of Raven's Cliff haunted me. The next morning, I got a call from the lab that had analyzed the soil samples from the dead circle. The technician sounded confused. "Ms. Monroe, I don't know how to explain this, but the soil inside the circle shows signs of extreme compression. Compression? Like something very heavy pressed down on it, but not evenly, more like... It's hard to describe. The soil particles are compacted in a way I've never seen before, almost like they've been subjected to intense centrifugal force. Centrifugal force? Like from spinning? Exactly. If I didn't know better, I'd say something was spinning rapidly in that circle, creating force that compressed the soil and killed the vegetation. I asked her to send me the full analysis, then spent the next several hours studying it. The compression patterns were consistent with sustained rotational force, exactly what Dr. Vance had predicted. But there was something else in the data that caught my attention. The soil compression wasn't uniform across the circle. It was strongest at a radius of about 8 feet from the center, then decreased toward both the center and the outer edge, like the force had been concentrated in a ring. I pulled out Marcus's GPS data and did some calculations. If he'd been running in a circle with a 20-foot diameter, his average distance from the center would have been right around 8 feet. The strongest soil compression matched exactly where his feet would have been striking the ground as he ran. The evidence was all fitting together, creating a picture of what had happened that was both logical and terrifying. Marcus had encountered the vortex, been caught in its rotational pull, and run faster and faster in tighter circles until the forces involved exceeded anything the human body should withstand. But that still didn't explain where he'd gone. I called Dr. Vance again and described the soil compression findings. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. "Miss Monroe, I need to tell you something. After our last conversation, I've been running computer simulations, modeling what would happen if a human body was subjected to the forces we've been discussing. And the results are disturbing. At the speeds and rotation rates suggested by your GPS data, the centrifugal forces would create what's called a potential barrier. Think of it like a wall of force surrounding the runner, created by their own momentum. I don't understand. Imagine spinning something on a string so fast that it can't escape its circular path, even if you let go of the string. The momentum itself keeps it locked in orbit. Now imagine that on a massive scale, with enough energy that space-time itself starts to warp around the runner. Space-time. I know how it sounds, but at extreme rotational velocities, relativistic effects come into play. The runner isn't just moving through space anymore. They're bending it, creating a localized distortion, and if they reach a critical threshold, they what? Disappear? In a manner of speaking. They might transition to a state where they're no longer interacting with normal matter. Or they might create a singularity event, a point where the physics we understand breaks down entirely. I honestly don't know. The math suggests it's possible, but I've never heard of it happening in reality. After we hung up, I sat in my cabin staring at the equations she'd sent me, trying to wrap my head around what she was suggesting. Marcus hadn't just died on that cliff. He'd run so fast, generated so much force that he'd literally broken the laws of physics and ceased to exist in any way we could understand. It sounded like science fiction, but the evidence supported it. 2 days later, Aaron and I went back to Raven's Cliff one more time. I needed to see the site again, to stand in that circle and try to understand what Marcus had experienced in his final moments. The fog was gone that day, replaced by clear autumn skies. We made the climb up the chimney, easier now on our third attempt, and stood on the cliff top in bright sunlight. The dead circle was still there, the vegetation showing no signs of recovery. If anything, the dead area seemed to have expanded slightly, the brown grass creeping outward in a perfect ring. I walked the perimeter slowly, taking new measurements, documenting everything. That's when I found something we'd missed before. At 4 points around the circle, equally spaced like compass points, there were small indentations in the soil. They were shallow, easy to miss, but clearly not natural. Each one was about 3 inches across and an inch deep, forming a perfect square. "Aaron, look at these." He crouched down to examine them. "What are they?" "I don't know, but they're too regular to be natural. And look, they're exactly 90 degrees apart." I took photos and measurements, then noticed something else. The indentations weren't random. They were aligned with the cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. "This is deliberate," I said. "Someone or something created these, but when? We've been all over this cliff top, and we never saw these before. Maybe they were always there, and we just missed them. Or maybe they appeared after Marcus vanished." Aaron gave me a look. "Lydia, things don't just appear. There has to be a logical explanation." But I wasn't so sure anymore. Nothing about this case had a logical explanation. I pulled out my phone and took GPS coordinates of each indentation, then compared them to Marcus's GPS track from his watch. The 4 points aligned exactly with the cardinal extremes of his circular route, the northernmost, southernmost, easternmost, and westernmost points he'd reached while running. It was like he'd left marks behind, imprints of his final circuit stamped into the earth itself. We spent another hour on the cliff top, but found nothing else unusual. As we prepared to descend, I stood at the edge one more time, looking down at the 200-foot drop. Marcus had stood right here, on his toes, facing this void. What had he been thinking? Had he been aware of what was happening to him? Or had the vortex's pull been so complete that he'd lost all sense of self, becoming nothing but motion and force? I thought about that message carved into the rock. "Can't stop." Maybe he'd carved it in a moment of clarity, a brief window where he understood what was happening but couldn't break free. A final warning to whoever might find it. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe it wasn't a message of desperation, but of resignation. An acknowledgement that some forces, once set in motion, cannot be stopped. Addition, word count: 1,350 words. "Ms. Monroe, I don't know how to explain this, but the soil inside the circle shows signs of extreme compression." "Compression?" "Like something very heavy pressed down on it, but not evenly, more like..." It's hard to describe. The soil particles are compacted in a way I've never seen before, almost like they've been subjected to intense centrifugal force. Centrifugal force? Like from spinning? Exactly. If I didn't know better, I'd say something was spinning rapidly in that circle, creating force that compressed the soil and killed the vegetation. After I hung up, I sat at my desk, trying to piece it together. Marcus had run in circles. The GPS said 7.4 miles in 52 minutes. If he'd been running in a circle with a 20-foot diameter, he would have needed to complete hundreds of laps to cover that distance. But that didn't explain the centrifugal force, unless... I pulled up a calculator and started doing math. If Marcus had been running fast enough, could he have created enough force to compress the soil? No, that was impossible. Human running speed couldn't generate that kind of force, unless he was running faster than humanly possible. I looked at the GPS data again. 7.4 miles in 52 minutes. That was an average pace of about 7 minutes per mile. But what if it hadn't been constant? What if he'd started slow and then accelerated, going faster and faster until he was moving at speeds that shouldn't be possible? It sounded insane, but it fit the evidence. I called Aaron. "I need you to come back to the station. I think I figured something out." When he arrived, I showed him my calculations and the lab results. He listened without interrupting, his face growing more skeptical as I talked. "Lydia, you're suggesting that Marcus somehow ran so fast that he created centrifugal force strong enough to compress soil and kill plants. That's not physically possible. I know how it sounds, but look at the evidence. The GPS track, the soil compression, the dead vegetation arranged in a perfect circle. What else explains it? A dozen other things. Underground gas leak that killed the plants. Equipment malfunction with the GPS. Marcus having some kind of psychotic break and hurting himself, then his body being moved by an animal before we found it. Then explain the other cases. 7 disappearances, same pattern. All trail runners. All vanishing after their GPS shows them running in circles. That made Aaron pause. You found more cases. 7, same MO, same GPS anomalies. Some of them left messages saying can't stop, just like Marcus. Aaron sat down heavily. Okay, that's concerning. But we still don't have a mechanism. People don't just spontaneously start running in circles at superhuman speeds. What if they're not doing it voluntarily? What if something is making them do it? Like what? Mind control? Possession? I don't know, but we need to figure it out before it happens again. The problem was, we had no idea where to even start looking for answers. The cases were spread across years and locations. There was no common factor besides the victims being trail runners and the GPS showing circular routes. 2 days later, I got a call that changed everything. A hiker had found another GPS watch. This one at a location called Chimney Rock, about 15 miles north of Raven's Cliff. The watch belonged to one of the earlier disappearance cases, a runner named Jennifer Marks who'd vanished 3 years ago. Aaron and I rushed to the location. The watch had been found wedged in a crack in the rock formation, like it had been deliberately hidden. When I pulled up the last recorded activity, I felt sick. Same pattern. Perfect circle. 6.8 miles in 47 minutes. But this time there was something else. The watch had a feature that recorded heart rate, and the data was still stored in the memory. Jennifer's heart rate had started at a normal 145 beats per minute, consistent with running. But over the course of the activity, it had steadily increased. 160, 175, 190, 210, and finally in the last recorded minute, 207 beats per minute. That was impossible. The human heart can't sustain rates that high during exercise. At 247 BPM, she should have gone into cardiac arrest. But the recording hadn't stopped there. In the final seconds, her heart rate had spiked to 312 BPM, and then the watch had shut off. She was running herself to death, Aaron whispered, looking at the data. Her heart was beating so fast it should have exploded. Or something was making it beat that fast, I said. We searched the area around Chimney Rock but found nothing else. No body, no clothes, no sign of Jennifer Marks. Just like Marcus, she'd simply vanished. That night, I lay awake thinking about those heart rate numbers. 312 beats per minute. That wasn't running, that was something else entirely. Something that pushed the human body past its limits and into territory that shouldn't be survivable. And then I had a terrible thought. What if they weren't dead? What if whatever was happening to these runners was keeping them alive somehow, forcing their bodies to keep functioning at impossible levels? What if, somewhere out there in the mountains, Marcus Taylor was still running? I became obsessed. I know that's not a good thing for a ranger, for anyone, really, but I couldn't let it go. Every spare moment, I was reviewing the cases, studying the GPS data, trying to find a pattern that would explain what was happening to these runners. Aaron was worried about me. He said I was starting to look like one of those conspiracy theorists with red string connecting photos on a wall. He wasn't entirely wrong. My cabin was covered in printouts, maps with circles marking the disappearance locations, notebooks full of calculations. The other cases haunted me. Each one had a name, a face, a family left behind with no answers. Jennifer Marks, The runner whose watch we'd found at Chimney Rock had been 28. She'd been training for the Western States 100, one of the most prestigious ultramarathons in the country. Her husband told me she'd gone out for what should have been a simple 15-mile training run. She'd texted him before starting, "Perfect morning for a run. Love you." She never came home. David Okonkwo disappeared in 2016. He was a college track coach, 41 years old, father of 3. His GPS watch was never found, but witnesses reported seeing him running on the trail early one foggy morning. When searchers followed his route 3 hours later, they found his water bottle on the ground, still half full, at a location called Hawk's Nest Overlook. No other trace of him was ever discovered. Sarah Kim vanished in 2014. She was a doctor, an ER physician who ran to decompress from the stress of her job. Her watch was found 6 months after her disappearance by a hiker who'd wandered off trail. The GPS showed the same pattern, a perfect circle, 8.2 miles, recorded in 63 minutes. The location was an abandoned fire lookout tower, and at the base of the tower, searchers found both of her running shoes, placed side by side, laces tied together. I started creating detailed files on each victim, interviewing their families when I could reach them, gathering every piece of information about their final runs. What I discovered was chilling. All 8 runners had been alone. All 8 had started their runs in the early morning between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock a.m. All 8 had been experienced, most with years of trail running under their belts. And in every case where we had detailed GPS data, the circular pattern was present, along with escalating heart rates that climbed to impossible levels. But there were other commonalities I hadn't noticed before. 6 of the 8 runners had posted on social media the night before their disappearances, mentioning feeling restless or having strange energy. 2 had reported unusually vivid dreams about running the night before they vanished. Marcus Taylor had been one of them. I went back through his social media and found a post from the night before his last run. "Can't sleep. Feel like I could run forever tonight. Tomorrow's run is going to be epic." Could run forever. Those words stuck with me, but then I found it. The connection I'd been looking for. All 8 disappearances, including Marcus, had occurred on days with specific weather conditions, unseasonably warm temperatures preceded by cold nights, creating thick morning fog. The fog was the key. I started researching atmospheric conditions, looking for anything that might create unusual phenomena in combination with fog. That's when I stumbled across a paper written by a meteorologist studying what he called atmospheric vortices. Rare weather phenomena that occurred when specific temperature and pressure conditions created rotating columns of air. These vortices were mostly harmless, invisible to the naked eye, and lasted only minutes before dissipating. But in certain conditions, particularly in mountainous terrain with fog, they could persist longer and create unusual effects. The paper mentioned something that made me sit up straight. Subjects in the vicinity of these vortices sometimes reported feeling compelled to move in circular patterns, like being caught in a gentle current. I contacted the meteorologist, Dr. Sarah Vance, and explained what we'd been dealing with. She was based in Colorado, studying mountain weather patterns, and when I described the cases to her, she went silent for a long moment. "How long has this been happening?" she asked finally. "At least 15 years that we know of? Probably longer." "And you're certain about the GPS patterns, perfect circles in all cases?" "In every case where we recovered a watch or tracker. Yes." She asked me to send her everything: the dates, locations, GPS data, weather records, witness statements. I compiled it all into a massive file and emailed it to her that night. 3 days later, she called me back, and I could hear the excitement and fear in her voice. "Miss Monroe, I've analyzed the atmospheric data for those dates and locations. In 7 of the 8 cases, conditions were ideal for vortex formation. The 8th case is inconclusive due to limited data, but likely also fits the pattern. So, these runners encountered these atmospheric vortices? I asked. It appears so, but here's what I don't understand. These vortices create gentle rotational force, like a slow current in water. They might make someone feel slightly disoriented, might even influence their direction of movement subtly, but they shouldn't be strong enough to physically compel someone to run in circles. And they certainly can't explain the speeds and heart rates you've described. Then, what does explain it? There was a long pause. I have a theory, but it's going to sound strange. What if the vortex wasn't the cause, but the trigger? What if these runners encountered the vortex and something in their physiological or psychological makeup reacted to it in an extreme way? Like an allergy? More like a resonance. Their bodies somehow locked into the rotational frequency of the vortex and couldn't break free. Think of it like this. You know how a wine glass shatters when exposed to the right frequency of sound? The glass resonates with that specific pitch until the vibrations tear it apart. What if certain people, maybe due to their cardiovascular fitness, their running biomechanics, or even their brain chemistry, are susceptible to resonating with these atmospheric vortices? She continued, her voice growing more animated. When they enter the vortex while running, their stride pattern locks into sync with the rotational frequency. Their nervous system can't break the pattern because it's feeding back on itself, reinforcing the circular motion. The faster they go, the stronger the resonance becomes, until they're trapped in a feedback loop they can't escape. Jesus, I muttered. So their own bodies betray them. Essentially, yes. And here's the truly terrifying part. I've been modeling the forces involved, and if someone was caught in this kind of resonance, running faster and faster in tighter and tighter circles, the centrifugal forces would eventually become extreme. How extreme? At the speeds your GPS data suggests, and given the circle diameters you've measured, we're talking about forces approaching several Gs, like what fighter pilots experience, but sustained over minutes, not seconds. I thought about Marcus, running in circles on top of Raven's Cliff for 52 minutes. What would that do to a human body? In theory, the blood would be forced outward toward their extremities. The heart would have to work incredibly hard to pump blood back to the brain against the centrifugal force. That explains the escalating heart rates you found. And eventually what? Her voice dropped. Eventually, the forces would become too great for the human body to withstand. But here's what I can't explain. You should be finding bodies. Dead from cardiac failure, from brain hemorrhages, from the catastrophic failure of their circulatory systems. But you're not finding bodies, you're finding nothing. So, where are they going? That's the question I can't answer. Physically, they should be dying right there in those circles. But something else is happening. Something I don't have an explanation for. It sounded insane, but it was the first explanation that actually fit the evidence. Dr. Vance, if someone was caught in this resonance running in circles unable to stop, what would happen to them? Another pause. Theoretically, their body would be subjected to increasing centrifugal force. If they continued to accelerate, unable to break the pattern, they might reach speeds far beyond normal human capability. The heart rate would spike, trying to supply oxygen to muscles working at impossible levels. And eventually what? I don't know. The theoretical model breaks down. At the speeds and heart rates you've described, the human body should fail catastrophically. But you haven't found bodies, which suggests something else is happening. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Then I made a decision. I needed to test the theory. The weather forecast for the next week showed the exact conditions we'd been discussing. A warm front moving in after several cold nights. Perfect conditions for fog and atmospheric vortices. I told Aaron what I was planning. He thought I was crazy. You want to deliberately go to one of these locations during the right weather conditions and see if you encounter a vortex. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Lydia, even if your theory is right, you'd be putting yourself in exactly the same danger that took Marcus and the others. I won't run. That seems to be the key. All the victims were trail runners, moving fast through the conditions. I'll hike slowly, carefully. If I feel anything unusual, I'll stop immediately. This is a terrible idea. You got a better one? He didn't. 3 days later, I stood at the base of Raven's Cliff at 5:30 a.m. The conditions were perfect, if you could call them that. A thick fog hung in the air, so dense I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The temperature was already climbing, creating that strange warm and cold feeling that preceded the disappearances. Aaron was with me, though he'd made me promise to stay tethered to him with a rope, like we were mountaineering. If something started to happen, he could pull me back. We hiked slowly toward the base of the chimney, the same route Marcus had taken. I had my own GPS watch on, recording everything. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Just fog, thick and damp, muffling all sound. But then, about 30 yards from the chimney, I felt it. A subtle tug, not physical, but something else, like a current in water, except this was air. It wanted me to move to the right, to adjust my course into a gentle curve. Aaron, I feel something, I said quietly. What kind of something? Like a pull, very gentle. It's trying to make me turn. Stop moving, right now. I stopped, but the feeling didn't go away. It was stronger now, insistent. My legs wanted to move, to take steps to the right, to curve my path into a circle. I looked down at my GPS watch. The track was showing my route, and sure enough, over the last 50 yards, my supposedly straight path had curved into a shallow arc. The vortex is here, I said. I'm in it. Then we're leaving, now. Aaron tugged on the rope, but I held my ground. Wait, I need to understand what happens if you don't resist it. Absolutely not. We're done here. But I was already moving, just a few steps, following the pull. It felt natural, easy, like following a path I'd always known. Right foot, left foot, curving gently to the right. And then I felt it intensify. The pull became stronger, and my pace unconsciously increased. I was walking faster now, still following the curve, and I could feel my heart rate climbing. Lydia, stop! Aaron's voice seemed far away, even though he was right next to me. I tried to stop, but my legs didn't want to. They wanted to keep moving, to go faster, to complete the circle. I could feel the pattern now, the shape my path was making. A perfect circle, just like the GPS data from Marcus and the others. With a massive effort of will, I forced my legs to stop. I stood there, trembling, fighting against the pull that wanted me to keep moving. Pull me out, I gasped. Now. Aaron yanked on the rope, hard, and I stumbled backward, out of the invisible current. The sensation cut off immediately, like stepping out of water onto dry land. I collapsed onto the ground, breathing hard, my heart pounding. When I checked my watch, I'd only been in the vortex for maybe 90 seconds, but it had recorded me traveling in a perfect arc, the beginning of a circle. Jesus Christ, Aaron said, kneeling beside me. Your pupils are dilated. You look like you're in shock. I felt it, I said. The compulsion, if I'd been running, if I'd entered that current at speed, I don't think I could have stopped. It would have just kept accelerating, kept pulling me faster and faster into the circle. So your theory was right. part of it. But I still don't know what happens at the end. Where did Marcus go? Where are the bodies? We hiked back to the station, and I spent the rest of the day analyzing the data from my watch and writing up my findings. But I knew we were still missing something crucial. That night, I got a call from Rebecca, Marcus's girlfriend. She was crying. "They're going to declare him dead," she said. "The police said there's been no activity on his credit cards, no phone pings, nothing. They think he fell from the cliff and an animal carried off his body, even though they can't find any evidence of it." "I'm sorry, Rebecca. But you don't think that's what happened, do you? I saw the reports, the GPS data, the messages. You think something else happened to him?" I hesitated, then decided she deserved the truth. "I think Marcus encountered an atmospheric phenomenon that made him unable to stop running. I think his body was subjected to forces that shouldn't be survivable. And I think at some point he ceased to be in our physical space." "What does that mean?" "I don't know exactly. But the centrifugal forces at the speeds he would have been reaching, the heart rate spike, there's a theoretical point where matter behaves differently, where the normal rules of physics start to break down." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was small, broken. "The night before he disappeared, he couldn't sleep. He kept getting up, pacing around the apartment. I asked him what was wrong, and he said he felt like he needed to run, like his body was full of energy that had nowhere to go." "Did he mention anything else?" "He said he'd had a dream. He was running on a trail, but the trail was spinning, like he was on the inside of a wheel. He said in the dream he couldn't tell if he was running or if the ground was moving under him. It bothered him, but he laughed it off, said it was just pre-run anxiety." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Did Marcus ever mention having dreams like that before?" "No, never. He usually didn't remember his dreams at all." She paused. "You think the dream meant something?" "I don't know, but several of the other runners reported similar things before they disappeared. Restlessness, strange energy, vivid dreams about running. So something was calling to them before they even got on the trail?" "Maybe. Or maybe they were already sensitive to whatever causes the resonance and they could feel it approaching, like animals can sense earthquakes before they hit." Rebecca started crying harder. "I should have stopped him. I should have told him not to go that morning." "You couldn't have known." "But I felt something was off. I knew something was wrong, and I let him go anyway." Her voice broke. "The last thing I said to him was, 'Be careful.' He laughed and said he'd been running these trails for years. He said he could run them in his sleep." I closed my eyes, thinking about Marcus's final run. The fog, the vortex, the compulsion that had driven him up that cliff and into the circle he couldn't escape. "Rebecca," I said carefully, "can you tell me more about Marcus? About who he was before all this?" She was quiet for a moment, collecting herself. He was kind. That's the first thing everyone said about him. He worked as a civil engineer, designing bridges. He said he liked the idea of creating connections, bringing people together." "How did he get into trail running?" "His dad died when Marcus was 25. Heart attack, totally unexpected. After that, Marcus started running. He said it was the only time his mind went quiet, the only time he didn't think about his dad being gone. Over the years, it became more than that. It became who he was." "Did he ever mention feeling like running controlled him, rather than the other way around?" Rebecca thought about it. "Sometimes, yeah. He'd joke about being addicted to it. Said he got cranky if he went more than a day without running. His friends called him a running junkie. But it seemed healthy, you know. It kept him fit, gave him goals, helped him process stress." "Did he ever talk about pushing limits? Wanting to go faster, farther?" "All the time. He was always chasing something: a faster time, a longer distance, a harder course. I used to worry he'd hurt himself, but he was so careful about training, about listening to his body. He never got injured, not even once in all the years I knew him. Until the morning he couldn't stop running. I asked Rebecca if she'd send me some photos of Marcus, not just from his running, but from his regular life. She emailed them to me that night. In the photos I saw a man who looked healthy and happy. Marcus at work, wearing a hard hat at a construction site. Marcus at a friend's wedding, smiling in a suit. Marcus at the finish line of an ultramarathon, exhausted but triumphant. But there was one photo that stopped me cold. It was from Marcus's social media, posted 3 weeks before he disappeared. He was standing at a trail junction, and behind him, barely visible in the morning fog, you could see the outline of Raven's Cliff. The caption read, "Scouted a new route today. Can't wait to really push it on the next run." He'd been there before. He'd seen the cliff, maybe even felt the pull of the vortex without understanding what it was. And then he'd come back, deliberately, choosing that route for his final run. Had some part of him known? Had he felt the call of whatever force waited in that fog and returned to answer it? After we hung up, I sat in my cabin and stared at the maps on my wall. 8 runners, all gone. All victims of a rare atmospheric phenomenon combined with the worst possible timing and circumstances. The next morning, I submitted my official report to the Park Service and the FBI. I included Dr. Vance's meteorological analysis, my own experience in the vortex, and my theory about what had happened to the missing runners. The response was mixed. Some investigators thought I'd found a plausible explanation. Others thought I was grasping at straws, seeing patterns where none existed. The FBI officially classified the cases as unsolved missing persons, presumed dead. But the Park Service took my findings seriously. They issued new safety guidelines for trail runners, warning them to avoid running alone in foggy conditions, especially during specific weather patterns. They installed warning signs at locations where vortices were most likely to form. I don't know if it will help. The runners who vanished were all experienced, all careful. They just had the bad luck to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, when atmospheric conditions created something that shouldn't exist. 6 months after Marcus disappeared, his girlfriend came back to visit the area. She asked if I would take her to Raven's Cliff, to the place where we'd found his shoe. We made the climb together, and I watched as she stood at the edge of the dead circle, looking down at the spot where Marcus had stood on his toes, facing the drop. "Do you think he was afraid at the end?" she asked quietly. I thought about the message carved in the rock. "Can't stop." I thought about the GPS showing him running faster and faster in an ever-tightening circle. "I think he was terrified," I said honestly. "But I also think it happened too fast for him to fully process it. One moment he was running, and then something caught him, and he couldn't break free." She placed a small bouquet of flowers in the center of the circle, where we'd found the shoe. Then she stood there for a long time, saying goodbye to a man who'd vanished into thin air. But before we left, something strange happened. Rebecca stepped into the dead circle to adjust the flowers, and when she did, she gasped and stumbled backward. "What's wrong?" I asked, moving to help her. I felt something, like a vibration, under my feet. I looked down at the ground. The soil appeared normal, unchanged, but when I stepped carefully into the circle myself, I felt it too. A subtle thrumming, almost below the threshold of perception, like standing on top of a generator or near high-voltage power lines. The vibration wasn't constant. It pulsed in a regular rhythm, about 1 beat per second. I pulled out my phone and opened a decibel meter app. Even though I couldn't hear anything, the meter was registering low-frequency sound waves right at the edge of human hearing. "It's still here," I said quietly. "Whatever created the circle, it left something behind." "What does that mean?" "I don't know." But I documented it, taking readings at different points in the circle. The vibration was strongest at the center, where Marcus's shoe had been, and weakest at the edges. And when I compared the pulse rate to Marcus's final heart rate data, I found something that made my blood run cold. The vibration was pulsing at exactly 78 beats per minute. Marcus's resting heart rate had been 78 BPM. I knew this because Rebecca had mentioned it. Said he'd been proud of how low it was, a sign of his cardiovascular fitness. Somehow, the circle was still resonating with his heart rate. 6 months after he'd vanished, this place still carried an echo of him. I reported this finding to Dr. Vance, who immediately arranged to come visit the site with specialized equipment. 2 weeks later, she arrived with a team of graduate students and enough scientific instruments to fill a small truck. Over the course of 3 days, they measured everything: electromagnetic fields, ionization levels, gravitational anomalies, soil composition changes over time. What they found defied explanation. The dead circle wasn't just dead, it was fundamentally altered at a molecular level. The soil particles showed signs of having been exposed to extreme rotational forces, but also something else, a form of radiation that didn't match any known spectrum. "It's like the space inside this circle exists in a slightly different state than the space outside it," Dr. Vance explained, showing me graphs I barely understood. "The quantum probability fields are shifted. It's subtle, but measurable. In English, please. Remember how we talked about Marcus potentially creating a localized space-time distortion? This is evidence that he actually did it. He ran so fast, generated so much rotational energy, that he literally changed the nature of space itself within this circle. And the change is permanent. So, what does that mean for Marcus? Where did he go?" She looked at me with eyes full of wonder and fear. "I think he might still be here, just not in a way we can interact with. Like he's folded into a different dimension of space, one that occupies the same physical location but exists perpendicular to our reality." "That's impossible. So is everything else about this case. But the evidence supports it. The vibration you felt, that's not coming from the ground. It's coming from something occupying the same space as the ground, but shifted out of phase with normal matter. It's like hearing a heartbeat through a wall." I felt sick. "So he's trapped? Still running?" "I don't know. The energy signature is stable, not diminishing. Whatever state he's in, it's self-sustaining. He's not dead in any way we understand death, but he's not alive either. He's something else." After Dr. Vance left with her team and their disturbing findings, I found myself returning to Ravenscliff more and more often. I'd stand at the edge of the circle, trying to sense that vibration, trying to understand what Marcus had become. And sometimes, on foggy mornings when the conditions were right, I swear I could almost see something. A flicker of motion in the center of the circle, like someone running past so fast they were just a blur. My eyes would track the movement, following a circular path, and for just a second I'd think I saw a figure, but when I blinked, it was gone. Aaron told me I was seeing what I wanted to see, that grief and guilt were making me imagine things. Maybe he was right, but I don't think so. I think Marcus is still there, still running in that circle on top of Raven's Cliff, trapped in a loop that will never end. I think all 8 of the missing runners are still out there, locked in their own eternal circuits, existing in the spaces between spaces. And I think they're not alone. 3 months after Dr. Vance's visit, I was reviewing missing person reports from other regions, looking for similar patterns. What I found terrified me. Over the past 50 years, there have been hundreds of disappearances matching our profile. Trail runners, early morning starts, foggy conditions, GPS anomalies when watches were recovered. The pattern extends far beyond the Appalachian Trail, into the Rockies, the Cascades, the Sierra Nevada. Anywhere there are mountains, fog, and runners pushing their limits, people are vanishing. And in every case where we have detailed data, the GPS shows the same thing. Perfect circles, escalating heart rates, impossible speeds. The phenomenon isn't limited to our area, it's global. And it's been happening for decades, maybe longer, hidden in the statistics of missing hikers and unexplained disappearances. How many circles are out there, I wonder? How many places where reality is a little bit broken, where runners still spin in eternal loops, their heartbeats echoing through dimensions we can't see? I reported all of this to the Park Service and to the FBI, to anyone who would listen. The response was limited. Some people took it seriously, issuing warnings and guidelines. Others dismissed it as coincidence and pseudoscience. But the disappearances continue. Just last month, a runner went missing in Colorado. Her GPS watch was found at the summit of a mountain, showing the familiar pattern. A perfect circle, 6.2 miles, 48 minutes. And at the center of the circle, investigators found her shoes, placed carefully side by side. The circle is still there, waiting for someone to study it, to measure it, to try to understand what happened. But I know what they'll find. The same things we found at Raven's Cliff. The same vibration, the same altered space, the same evidence that someone ran so fast they left our reality behind. As we descended the chimney and hiked back toward the ranger station, I thought about all the things I still didn't understand. The perfect circles, the impossible speeds, the complete disappearances with no bodies, no blood, no evidence except GPS tracks that shouldn't exist. I've been a ranger for 9 years and I thought I understood the dangers of the wilderness. Bears, weather, terrain, human error, those are all tangible threats I know how to handle. But this was different. This was the wilderness itself, the atmosphere and physics combining in ways that created something deadly and inexplicable. Something that could reach out and grab a runner in the fog, spin them faster and faster until they crossed some threshold we don't have words for. I still patrol the trails. I still help lost hikers and maintain the markers and do all the normal ranger duties. But on foggy mornings when the conditions are right, I find myself watching the trail runners who pass by, wondering if today will be the day another one vanishes. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about Marcus Taylor running in circles on top of Raven's Cliff. Running and running, unable to stop, his heart beating impossibly fast, his body moving at speeds that defied physics. And I wonder, at what point in that final circle did he stop being human and become something else? At what point did he cross over into whatever lies beyond the limits of endurance and physics? I don't have answers, just questions, and a wall covered in maps with circles marking places where runners entered the fog and never came back. The Appalachian Trail is 2,190 miles of beautiful, deadly wilderness. We do our best to keep people safe. But sometimes the trail reveals that there are dangers we don't understand, can't predict, and have no defense against. All we can do is document them, warn others, and hope that the next person who goes running in the fog will make it home. Marcus Taylor's case remains open. Officially, he's a missing person, presumed dead. His body was never recovered. His final resting place is unknown. But I know where he spent his last moments. On top of Raven's Cliff, running in circles he couldn't escape, leaving behind a single shoe and a message carved in stone. Can't stop. And he didn't. Not until whatever force had caught him decided to let go, or pulled him somewhere we can't follow. I carry his GPS watch in my pack now, a reminder of what's out there in the fog. A reminder to stay vigilant, to respect the wilderness, and to understand that for all our technology and knowledge, there are still things in these mountains that we can't explain. The trail is waiting. It's always waiting. And somewhere in the fog, maybe the vortex is spinning still.